Hi, welcome to the show. This is Yogi Chander. I'm here live with Emily Moyer, and it is Friday, December 11th. How are you doing? Thank you for watching the show. And yeah, Emily, how are you doing? Really,
I thought you were talking to me. I'm doing great. Hi to everybody. Hello.
you're the only one here right now. So
All right. So hello to myself. Hello to you.
hello to you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
Cool. What's been the best part of your Friday so far?
Most of the morning was spent doing administrative tasks on the computer, which, as we were pre-showing, I already told you is not my favorite thing to do.
I feel you.
Yeah, so I would say that my favorite part of the day so far would probably have been, I was just listening to a really good interview that my friend Robert Phoenix did this morning. Oh, I don't know if he recorded it this morning, but with a guy named Howdy Mikowski. And it was...
I've seen Howie recently. He's had some cool stuff to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just about 45 minutes in. So I know he's been on Crow recently and on with some other people, but I haven't had a chance to listen to any of those yet. So I started listening to that with Robert. So that was pretty good. I kind of left that on pause to come do this. And then, I don't know, I had a few good chats with my one of my journey mates, Jeff Gates, this morning and whatnot. So I like to do a lot of that kind of thing. And we talk about, like I guess we examine together what the things that are going on in like the political and social and technological sphere, but we try and go like meta with it. Like, not what does it mean in the 3D picture, but what does it mean like on the further levels out, right? So this morning we were discussing the significance of this incredibly large billboard that I saw recently on a cross-country trip in a cornfield in Iowa that said Tulsi 2020. And I was like, that was pretty, it was interesting because we drove cross-country. I saw Trump signs everywhere. I did not see a single Biden-Harris. I'm not particularly political. I don't vote or anything like that. I just like to analyze it all. Cool. But I didn't see any Biden-Harris stuff or any leftover like Yang or any of that kind of stuff. But on the way back, we saw literally the biggest billboard I've ever seen in my entire life in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa. And I was like, that has to be expensive. Whether the person bought it and erected it themselves so they're not paying rent, or whether they're paying like a lease or a rent on that has to be expensive. So we were pondering the idea that a parallel reality exists in that cornfield in Iowa in which either Tulsi Gabbard won the election or where whatever is happening here over the next few weeks results in Brett Weinstein's idea of an emergency and Tulsi Gabbard becomes president.
Oh, wow. Or even if you flip it around and take that circle back to synchronicity, then maybe going back to something Howie might say, maybe that was from an alternate reality where that was, where the mud floods didn't happen. And that was, that part of Iowa was really like, is the biggest place in America or something.
Maybe. There was Ode to Tartaria in Des Moines, which I was very surprised about. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So if you look at now, can I screen share with you on this? Okay.
Let's see, if you don't have the ability to, let me know and I'll figure.
Let me see. Okay. So let me see if I can find what I'm talking about. So Des Moines, Iowa State Capitol building. Sorry, I'm a little slow with typing. I'm not very good. All right. State Capitol building. Let's see if I can find like a picture that looks like what I saw. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, there's lots of them. So I'll go ahead and figure out how I get back to you. Oh, no. Okay, now I've left you. So I have to find hold on a second. I have to find what window StreamYard is actually in on my computer now. Sorry, guys. Here it is. Okay. So now we can go screen share. I'm going to share screen.
I have multiple desktops open too with multiple screens open.
Okay. So now how do let's see how. Okay, select screen or window to share. Now, how do I know which one to do? That's weird.
It should show you like a little menu of screens to pick from.
Okay, that's not what it's showing me. So let me just, okay, no, I think it's not doing it. Okay, well, I will just ask that anybody who's interested go put in State Capitol Des Moines, Iowa building and look at some of the images of it. And then you will, yeah, so Yeah, maybe you can do that. Okay, so there we go.
Let's see. Oops. Okay, shoot. What do I type again?
So type in Iowa State Capitol Building, Des Moines, and then look at the images section.
Okay, let me share my screen with you. Let's see here.
I screen shared once on Robert's thing, and it's so different than the way it is on Zoom. I was like, this is how you get to screen share? Okay.
I see how to do it. I just want to make sure that because what I'm seeing is when I show the browser, I show us. But let's see here if that's not the case. Pardon me for one moment while I see.
No worries.
Application window. There we go. And there we go. How about that?
Okay, so scroll down. Yes, that's it. So if you see, from some angles, you can see that you have your 4 onion domes and then the big one in the middle, which I think we are coming to some form of like collective, I don't know if it's agreement, because I don't think everyone has to agree, but like an awareness or the possibility that that is indicative of some kind of free energy device or some kind of energy generation type of thing that was happening with these old buildings. So it looks like that, right? And then there was a lot of buildings there that had some of the telltale markers of what some people would consider a Tartaria building, or like, you know, a pre-mud flood or a mud flood building or whatever. You know, I'm like I don't know if I'm 100% sold on like the Tartaria idea, but there's definitely something going on with these old structures and buildings where they seem to have something going on that we don't completely understand. So I don't know if I would necessarily call that Tartaria. And I don't like some of the things that go along with the Tartaria where like, oh, the people from the past are way smarter than us, and therefore we must, you know, like worship them or whatever. But there's definitely interesting ideas, right? So,
Agreed.
So that exists in Des Moines. So this was probably less than an hour outside of Des Moines that I saw this. So yes, that's a possibility. I did find that like on this cross-country trip, I felt more like I was time traveling than that I was traveling through like a physical space kind of thing. So that's entirely possible. You don't necessarily, Tulsi Gabbard isn't necessarily like the first person to pop to mind when you think of like some sort of Tartarian queen or princess or whatever. But sure, why not?
Were there some certain pictures you wanted me to find, or just kind of scroll through?
No, just, I mean, so if you scroll through so people can just kind of see there, I think there's even some pictures of like the building from the inside where you're looking up at the dome and it is quite magnificent. That's what I kind of saw when I was looking.
The golden domes. See, girl, you know what? You just opened up a whole can of worms. I mean, this is a fascinating topic. I just have gotten into this recently, and I kind of fell into it because I was at a thrift store and I bought this cane. And I bought it because I like canes, and it was a nice wood. But there happened to be a little emblem on it that said Chicago World's Fair 1933. And so I looked into that, and I was like, "What is this? This is weird." Yeah. Then I found John Levy, and then you know, Autodidactic too, and several other people that are talking about that kind of thing, and Wayne, and or Howie, I mean, and so I've just fallen into this recently, and I've taken hours just kind of falling through these things. So please tell me everything you know.
Well, this is I'm certainly no kind of like Tartaria or Antiquitech expert, and there's part of me, a large part, like maybe the larger, but I'm not sure, that is concerned that this is like another like flat Earth or there are no forests on Earth kind of meme or
which, I remember that. What happened?
Right, like which doesn't. When I say that, I don't mean that there isn't some truth to them, right? But that like that becomes the new truth or the new reality, and like, you know, I'm not here to say that I have it all figured out. But one thing I have figured out is that like things don't come to you with a neat bow on them. There's no answer in one thread of information, right? So I think there are tremendous truths and awarenesses to be gleaned from all sorts of things that the alternative media gets into for periods of time that are like the hot thing, and then they sort of fizzle and whatever. I think that like when we start to go wrong is when we like pick one of those things as like our hill to die on, right? Because then that becomes the truth and nothing else can be, right? And I think that that's like we have this desire as humans to know, like, okay, we figure out like the one we've been told is wrong, but then we discover something that seems slightly more true. So now that's the truth. So now we have to stay stuck there until we absolutely can't lie to ourselves anymore, and it keeps us stuck in the various stages longer. So for me, it's like I take the stuff that really resonates, and that doesn't mean that things that don't resonate aren't true, right? But there's like, I don't have time to consider every little thing. So when something like resonates for me in a way that like, it's almost an indescribable quality where it just, like, you know that feeling like when you stick a key into a door and it just slides right in and open. You don't have to play with it at all or anything like that. Like there's something to, and the door opens, right? Like, so you very rarely have it slide in and turn easily and then have it not open, right? So like, I'm inclined to say, not that there can't be truth that's discovered where you have to work harder to open the door, right? But like, you know, like you have to start somewhere, and, you know, so this is when I say something resonates for me, it's like, okay, like it's sort of like it vibrates at the same rate that I'm doing right now. And so like, this is an easy one for me to like examine, like from a panoramic position, right? Or from a superposition. Whereas some of the other things that are like a little harder for me to like snuggle up to, it isn't that I shouldn't look there or that I can't look there. It's just that that's going to be more of an undertaking that is kind of like answering my emails or doing administrative tasks on the computer, where it's like, it's something that like at some point you have to do because that's the way things go, right? But that isn't usually how you dive into like an interest in a topic, right? So, you know, so as far as, so with that said, there's definitely some fascinating things going on with ancient technology and the way that they used sigil magic and energy fields or something like that, right? To generate like a different version of like how we have Wi-Fi, right? Like it seemed to be like a more organic version of it, right? Like I'm at this place where like, I don't even know what organic means anymore, because I think some of the things that we think of as organic are just an earlier form of technology, or a more biological, or a more sentient, natural form of technology, right? Yeah, it's like I had like a very deep psychedelic experience once where like the flowers and the trees and stuff were explaining to me that they were technology, but they were just superior to like the mechanized kinds we have now, because they're beautiful and they have multiple functions and they're not discordant for humans and whatever. So like they actually were taking offense to the idea that like we consider them something that isn't technology, right? Because that's what they are, and they know that. Wow,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
do you feel like, just a weird thing, do you think that that means that we are by that virtue also technology?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. I dig that. Cool.
At least the vessels were in our technology.
Word. Gotcha.
Okay. So we can get into that conversation about whether your body and your brain and your mind are actually who you are or not. But like this like suit that we inhabit, just like the suit that the tree inhabits, it is some form of hybrid type technology that is biological in nature, but can perform mechanistic tasks and can assimilate things that are different than it into themselves and whatnot, right? So it's a very, you know, it's an interest, and it's evolving, right? It's a technology that does respond to evolving and updates and all of that kind of stuff, right? Add-ons, if you will, plugins, right?
Right. Yeah. You know, actually, all that is observable in, say, cats or other animals. Now that you mention it, I haven't considered that before. But they are technology, and it's really observable to me because it's clear that there is something inhabiting that meat suit that they have, or especially like my little cat that's running around. He has a mechanism that's very instinctual when he plays and stuff, and he has things he wants to do, but there's someone there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, like, there's the theory that cats are just the surveillance system from Lyra, right? So you've heard that one.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I think about animals that are indicative of the fact that they are some kind of technology is, like, you'll see, like, my cat, she just passed away recently, but she would go to the same spot in the house at the same time every day, right?
Yeah.
You know, and now, of course, she was probably going there to sit in the light or escape the light, but it would be the exact minute almost. Like, I remember there was like one year where, like, she was driving my father nuts because, like, this is back years ago when I slept with my father, where she would go in and wake him up every morning about 6 minutes before his alarm was going to go off. It was the same. It was within a minute or so of the same time every morning, right? So to me, that's an indicator that it is very, very capable of clocking cycles.
Yes.
Right? Maybe better than we are at it, right? So maybe the animals are a higher form of technology.
Wow. They're not even sitting there watching the sun and the moon and the stars or anything like that necessarily.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, like, you know, a lot of cats don't go outside. I mean, all dogs pretty much go outside at some point, but a lot of cats don't go outside at all. Yet they still seem to be able to clock the sun and the moon in a way that seems like, I mean, that would be challenging for us if we weren't going outside to know what was what, right? So
that's right, exactly. That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. So as far as the Tartaria stuff goes, though, what I will say is that for the buildings that are still around that weren't destroyed as part of the World Expos or World's Fairs or whatever, right? They seem to have lasted in reasonable condition a lot longer than modern stuff seems to hold up. And so my guess would be that that's because that they were constructed in better harmony with the environment around them, right? Like it wasn't like in modern times, they're either trying to impose a function or a particular form. Like an architect either has an idea of what they want a building to look like, or if they're building some sort of factory or whatever it is, they need it to perform a certain function, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like, that gets imposed on the land where it's being constructed. Whereas I think in some of these more ancient buildings, cultures, societies, whatever, they were paying closer attention to what the, like, frequencies, the vibrations, the local nature, like the topography, geography, all that stuff, and making sure that it fit in well with what was going on there, because they wanted it to last, or if they knew that it was also going to serve as some kind of energy generation device or some kind of technology, they needed to make sure it worked, right? They weren't going to wire it up to take power from something else like we do now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like those castles that are in the sides of like mountain cliffs and things like that, to just kind of blend right in.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, you know, that was placed there.
Yeah.
For a reason, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like I think they call them odiums and stadiums and things like that. They're built right into the rock, right? So they had to definitely.
Coliseums and things, you mean?
Yeah. They definitely had to be mindful of the characteristics and nature of the materials and the location they were working with.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, so pretty much like, you know, what I know about Tartaria really is just like, I watch a few minutes here and there of like John Levi video once in a while. I've just been turned on to this. I'm interested to hear the rest of this interview with this Makowski. Every once in a while, my friend Jeff will share some other stuff.
I saw the one on Crow the other day. Is that the one you're talking about?
What was that?
The one on Crow. I listened to that the other day. Is that the one you're talking about with Howdy?
Yeah, I think he was on Crow recently. I'm listening to one with he just did with Robert Phoenix today.
Robert Phoenix.
Yeah, I think he was on with Jay Widener recently or something like that as well.
That too.
So I'll listen to some of that, and then like I did interview a few months back this guy named Victor Buga from Denmark, who is kind of interesting in the way he was researching Tartaria, and he started to find all of these things that he felt were clues that were ties to like a more, I don't know how to put it, like esoteric perception of the QAnon phenomenon, right? Where he discovered that out of some of these Tartarian areas, you could find that there was a culture that once was unified that split into two, and he referred to them as Q Celts and P Celts, right?
Okay, I heard a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Right. So like, I thought he had some very interesting things to say, and I thought, I mean, he's a very good researcher. I don't think that you have to connect them necessarily to QAnon or President Trump to make them interesting on their own. And I think that like sometimes when you try to attach them to QAnon or President Trump, then it actually muddies the water. And I think if he's just following the recognition of this split of a culture that went far out into the world and started spreading things everywhere, and just tracking it to its natural wherever it ends up, rather than going, okay, there's some things here that like echo the QAnon, so therefore they must be connected, right? Like, you know, I don't know about that for me. But I'm not, he could be right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know for sure. I'm not interested enough in QAnon to chase that down at all. I'm not really interested in QAnon, other than like just the fact that like it wouldn't go away for so long tells me that like there's something that's trying to be hidden by pushing that forward. So I would call that like the occulted aspects of the phenomenon. So that interests me. And he, I think, maybe did uncover a few of those. And I think it would, you know, I think it would be interesting to see that some of those threads followed with no attempt to tie them per se to the modern day iteration of QAnon, right? So, but you know, that's research and you know, whatever. But there were some very interesting threads uncovered there for sure. So I'd say that that's probably like the limits of my knowledge on Tartaria, right? Like I feel like I have like an intuitive understanding of a lot of like these sort of ancient futuristic cultures that use like free energy and that seem to have a really good understanding of like vibrational and frequency and color and light and sound technologies. Like that resonates for me on a very deep personal spiritual level. As far as like the music I like and the dancing I like and, you know, my own sort of visionary meditative practices and whatever, right? So that's what I get, you know, like when I look at some of their designs and I see the patterns that I have always seen in my inner world, even before I knew what any of that stuff was, I'm like, okay, this back there's something that is, there's a truth there. Is it the truth? I don't know, but it is a truth, right? So, so that, and then I'm trying to think, I've paid attention to some of this interesting stuff with like, you know, some of our natural elements. Do they have Phoenicians living in them and stuff like that, right? That seems to connect to some of these Tartarian ideas, but I don't know enough about that stuff to speak intelligently about it, right?
I'm not familiar with that thread.
So
is it some sort of linguistic tie?
Huh?
Is it like a linguistic thing, like a word thing?
The Q Celts and P Celts are a linguistic thing, right?
The Phoenician thing.
The Phoenician thing is this. So there's this guy that sometimes someone will send me a clip or two from named Martin Liedtke, and I think his channel is Flat Earth British, and he talks about this, right? Like, so there's idea that like when we see these sort of like faces in the clouds or in the chemtrails, whichever you prefer to think of them as, right? Like that these are actually possibly like entities or some sort of Phoenician characters or gods, and that then the rain has parts of them in it. So then they're in the ground and they're in the trees, and they're like that these things that used to be people the way we think of them are now in like embedded in the nature all around us. And then I guess there's the question of, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think they're good or bad? I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently. I'm just telling you like what my understanding is from having listened to little bits and pieces people send me. Yeah, and so, you know, but I don't. The only thing I know for sure is whatever the fuck this is. Is it okay if I swear?
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Okay. Whatever this is, whatever this is that we are in, it is far stranger than anything we were. It doesn't even resemble anything we were ever told by our parents or our teachers or anything like that. Like, we are in some kind of weird construct, machine, system, hallucination, joint as it may be, whatever, some combination thereof that has, not always stable sets of like parameters, laws, rules, and whatever, right? And that, truth and fiction are probably not as far apart as we've been led to believe that they are. Right?
Yeah. Now this is a topic that really fascinates me. I guess you'd call it existentialism, for lack of anything. I don't know what to call it, because I've just, what the fuck are we doing here? And what is all this stuff? And like, really, that never, every day that plagues me, or it feels like,
what the fuck is this?
Right. All of it, every single, and so exactly what you're saying is, I'm happy going down that road. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
What is your take? What do you think? What do you think about that?
I don't think we're in the same place every day. I don't think we are in the same reality every day. I think that, like,
there, by the way, say hello to Nish. Sorry, she just dropped in.
Hi Nish, how are you? I'm glad you joined us. I can't see I guess you're on YouTube. Okay, I guess you're on YouTube simultaneously. I'm not going to open that up because I'll get distracted with that and then not be able to to speak clearly. But no, okay, I guess you're on YouTube simultaneously. I'm not going to open that up because I'll get distracted with that and then not be able to to speak clearly. What happened?
I feel you.
We have an echo here. Hold on. Something. I'll get distracted with that and not be able to. What's happening? Hold
that
on.
Was me. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Yeah. There you go. Okay. So I don't think we wake up in the same place or in the same time every day, right? When I say we certainly, like, while we might wake up at the same time every day, if you set your alarm or whatever, you have an annoying cat or blah blah. I don't think we wake up in the same time, right? Okay. So I've had like another one that was like the flat Earth and the forests on Earth and the Tartaria was obviously like the Mandela Effect, right? Like, that was something that everybody thought that they had discovered the truth, like when they came to understand the Mandela Effect, and they were seeing evidence of it everywhere. And I'm not saying that isn't even 100% true. Like, it can be 100% true, and also we can be misunderstanding what that is. The idea that reality, like that somebody took the time or the effort to rewrite the realities or change all the books or whatever, like, I know that's only one perception of it, but, like what if have you ever been to a circular building that has paneled mirrors on it? Have you ever been inside of a circular building with paneled mirrors?
I believe so. I think I know what you mean.
Okay, so when I was a kid, like I was a gymnast, and I had a gymnastics meet at this gym that was in like I want to say Palos Verdes. I think it's called Palos Verdes, right, in that area. And okay. It was the building was circular and had these mirrored panels, and it was very so when I was like, and when you were on the beam, like when I would finish my skill and look up, I would see multiple versions of me on the wall, and it was very disorienting for a second until you kind of understood how to work with it, right? But I never forgot that experience. And it's kind of like, so I'm standing there on the beam and I see 30 or 40 of me like in an array in front of myself. So let's pretend that like my bed, like the beam is like my bed with me on it waking up. And when I wake up, there's like at least 40, but maybe, depending on how many paneled mirrors, right? Like 5, 10, 40, 600, whatever it is, they're fractals of the whole. And like, you have to decide one of those to like commit to start your day, right? You're going to pick one mirror to get ready in front of, because if you, right, a kind of thing. And then that sort of is the way you go off that day. And like, so I'm just giving like one maybe way of perceiving it or an example or whatnot. But I don't, I think that like we wake up and it's kind of like, it's sometimes, how you wake up in a start sometimes, or other times like takes you a while to come to, right? Like
Sure.
it may be that like that happens when you're in a different reality with a different frequency, right? Like that mirror number 1 is like snap to it, and mirror number 2 is like take your time and ease into it, and mirror number 3 is like fuck, I can't get up, right? Kind of thing. And then we're off on our day, and we think of this as like differences in our own condition, but maybe it's different realities. I'm not saying this is the truth. This is just like one possible perception of it.
I love this idea, though. Sure.
You know, and then
with that idea now, do you feel like, I mean, how does someone connect with those mirrors? Are they consciously seeing all of them, and are we seeing them and connecting with them, or are you like just opening to one that like energetically connects you somehow or something?
Right. Like, so like, I mean, I think it depends on how you choose to deal with the fact that there are multiple mirrors, or in this case, realities in front of you. Some people, that's like way too much for them. So they just are like, they find the one they like, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and they zero in on that one. Right. And it's right. And then others are like, oh, okay, like it's kind of neat if it, you know, like when this mirror, I look a little different. I'm gonna go like or you remember when you were a kid and you would go to like the place with the circus mirrors, and you look short and fat, and you look tall and skinny, and you look distorted, right? So some people will just pick one of those that they like, the one that makes them look tall and skinny or whatever, right? And they'll just stand in front of that one forever, right? And not necessarily explore what it feels like to like be the other way, right? And then others of us like variety, right? Or others of us are like confused, and we can't tell which one is us. Like we think that there's, have you ever seen like when a dog looks in the mirror and for a second they're confused? You're like, oh, there's another person there, right? So some people have that response, right? So like I think that like whatever is in front of us is like an array of possibilities. And whichever one you step into, like that's reality. And just like in the stories of Tartaria, every so many 100 years there's a reset. You could say that we have a reset every night when we go to bed and wake up, right? I've lived that way for a long time. I love that. Go for it. And sometimes, like sometimes you have that recognition that something is different, right? And other times you not so much. But then sometimes you don't really realize something is different, and you're in that reality for a while, and then you go back to one that you were in before, and you realize, oh, something changed. Like I used to feel this way, and then I didn't, and now I do again. And we're always thinking that like, oh, it must be me that's different. And in some cases it probably is. But what about the possibility that you returned to a timeline, a reality, a version of things that like you had been at once, and you left for a bit, or you're back, right? Person is feeling like they're not stable, that like things feel crazy and unsure to them, like the system would love for us to think it's because there's something wrong with us, rather than like if you wake up in a different city every day, it's going to feel disorienting. Even if you like it, it feels disorienting, right? And if you've switched realities overnight and it's different today than it was yesterday, it's actually normal that you feel a little unsettled. And so there's nothing wrong with us. It's just that we live in this varied array of stuff, and so
to live in the Groundhog Day, isn't it? Sometimes for people.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I mean, like when somebody has like a personal Mandela effect, have you experienced personal ones where it has nothing to do with anything about the society or the media or the public, where it's just right? So like when you have a personal Mandela effect, especially if that personal Mandela effect involves another person who's in your life, right? Then like, so for me, like I have a personal Mandela effect of Robert Phoenix.
Please tell us if you would.
Okay. So I listened to Robert for years before I was ever friends with him or certainly co-hosts with him or whatever.
Great stuff. A few of his shows. Awesome.
Yeah. And then, so like many years back, I remember him interviewing a woman who had either made a documentary or was friends with someone who had made a documentary, but it was like a fake document. Like, those documentaries that like they shoot. A what?
A mockumentary.
Mock, but it wasn't mock in terms of like making fun of it. It was just like they used actors to like make it look like a documentary, and they were honest about it. It wasn't like they were saying this is real and it's not, but it was shot in documentary form, but with actors, right?
I get it.
About John Teeter. That you're familiar with the time traveler John Teeter. Are you familiar?
The guy that claimed that he had come from another place. He was an art bell and stuff.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
So they were talking about this, and I went to afterwards and watched the movie. I watched the mockumentary, and I know that I watched it because I remember thinking that this in the movie, this house that John Teeter was hanging out in reminded me of houses that I was sometimes hanging out in during that time, because I was a junkie at that time. And if anybody's ever been into like a drug lifestyle, right? Like there's a very particular feeling, frequency, whatever, when you go into a house where like the people there, most of them are doing drugs, or it wasn't like a flop house like that. It was just a house where like people were doing drugs, right? Okay, it wasn't like crazy and gross and like that. It was just like, there were tweakers there, right? So I remember watching it and thinking, first of all, like this movie's not particularly well done. But some of the things that are happening here are interesting, and there was a ring of truth to it for me, right? And, okay, so I remember that. And then, like, a few months ago, for Conspiracy Cocktail, we were going to talk about John Teeter. And I went looking for that documentary again, and I couldn't find it. I could find a trailer for it, but I couldn't find anywhere or any way to watch it or to buy it. And so I went to Rob. Couldn't nowhere. Nowhere.
Like Shazam. It's another Mandela Effect.
Okay. So this was a movie that probably only received a few thousand views in its iteration. So like removing it from reality, if you went with the idea that like somebody is intentionally rewriting history, removing this one from reality, unless they're solely focused in on me and a few other people, right? It would seem like a large length to go to, right?
I hear you. Yeah.
I could find a trailer for it, but I could not find anywhere. I couldn't find a way I could pay $50 or $100 to watch it, or purchase a CD that was going to take 6 years for it to get to me, or maybe even it wouldn't get to me. They'd steal my money, but nothing, right? So I called Robert, or I sent Robert a text and asked him about it, and he didn't know what I was talking about. Like,
oh my God.
he was like, I never interviewed a person like that. And I was like, I remember, like, I just, like I had, even though I was doing drugs at that time, like my memory and my personal recall is always been excellent, including when on drugs. And like there was enough markers and like textural and sort of like, I remembered enough characteristics and details about it that like, I couldn't have been confusing it with something else. I don't know how I would ever have found my way to watching this movie that I was now at least able to still identify a trailer of, even if I couldn't find the movie and recognize that was it.
It's like you're living Mulholland Drive.
Right. So Robert Phoenix and I are friends. We talk. Like he knows that, like he thinks that this is really interesting and fascinating because he fully believes that happened because he knows my mind and my memory because we've been friends for so long. And also, he has no recollection of what I'm talking about. And he also has a tremendous memory, right? So one of us switched realities. Both of us maybe, right? Kind of something is different. Something is different.
What did happen there, I wonder? Yeah,
and when you're dealing with like the Berenstain Bears or the Sex and the City or whatever, like those were massive.
Stuffing.
Those were massive cultural like artifacts, right?
Yeah.
This is not, or maybe is it? Maybe John, maybe this documentary is really, really important, and maybe I'm one of the only few left who actually remembers it, and that there's something in there that is really, really important for this time that we're in right now.
Well, of course, if you consider the possibility that the whole thing is centered around a time traveler, then there are a lot of possibilities about that reality being true.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So some of this, like, and yeah, I have a lot. I mean, there's so many ways you can go with the time traveler stuff, right?
I love it.
Right? Like, is time traveling something we do? Is it like an act we undertake, or like an adventure we go on, or someplace we go? Or is it some kind of either natural or synthetic or technologically induced biological process, right? And I think like we're stepping up against something like that right now, right? In terms of what could be coming down the pike with a vaccine, or if you believe, as I do, that the vaccine is in the test, right?
Fascinating.
And that the test contains nanotechnology that has temporal implications.
Wow.
And so, like, I can go into why I think that might be if you like.
I'd love to hear that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
you can go down all the rabbit holes you want to. We're going to come back to a few things, but go ahead.
yeah. So I think so. Like, I spent way more years than I should have doing drugs, and one of the drugs that I got into pretty heavily for a long time was crystal methamphetamine, and it is my belief that that was where the original experimentation with smart dust nanoparticle technology was done.
Really?
And,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. Because a couple of reasons,
right?
It's something to easily put into that, right? Like it's something to easily include in that, right? And it is it's a population that nobody cares about, just like when they experimented with HIV and AIDS on the gay population in New York in the 70s. It was like a population that most people didn't care about, and B,
because the media had beaten them down for a long time, that segment.
Right. And also, like, a lot of them were living a lifestyle that was risky, and they partied a lot and whatever. So if a person is sick and dying, well, so-and-so does a lot of drugs, or they stay out all night drinking alcohol, or they have a lot of unprotected sex. So any of those things could be the reason why, not necessarily that it's a bioweapon that's been introduced to that culture intentionally. Right. So same thing about like the drug culture in general. Right. And so the reason I say this is because
LSD with the top stock and all that, maybe.
Totally, like absolutely. I mean, I've talked about that ad nauseum about how the dance music culture is being experimented on. They choose different stuff for different cultures, right? And
even rap and R&B these days.
Totally. They lean and.
What happened to the days when you could tut?
Right, yeah. Right. So I recall at a certain point, the meth experience changed. And like, sure, like one can always say, well, as a person descends deeper into addiction, the characteristic things, absolutely. But there's a couple of problems with that for me with this one. Like, I was not an all the time user of drugs. I was very, like, I'd do it, I'd pull out, I'd do it, I'd pull out. Like, I was never into this ongoing thing where my health super deteriorated, or like I couldn't hold it together at all, or anything like that. I go through weird little phases and stuff. So I was having a fair amount of time in like a normal reality, that first of all. But second of all, when I say there was a change in the experience of the drug, I'm not really talking about like it was more potent, it was less potent, it fucked me up more, it fucked me up less, it made me sick, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, the quality of the experience changed from what I would consider an analog experience to a digital experience. There was something about the way reality changed its pixelation somewhere starting around 2005, somewhere between 2005 2008. And at the time, I obviously didn't know about nanotechnology and smart dust and Morgellons and stuff like that, right?
Right.
But in hindsight, and I've been clean for many years now, and there's one thing that I have struggled that no one has been able to provide me a reasonable answer for, and that is that I hear the same exact stories from people who say they're targeted individuals that I used to hear from people that I did drugs with. Right, in terms of some things that are happening to them. Wow. And a lot of people I know who say that they're targeted individuals, or they are people that say that have Morgellons or something like that. I know that they're not on drugs, right? I know some of them I don't know, but some of them I do know, and I know that they're not on drugs, right? And like, literally, they will tell me some of the weirdest stuff. I've heard a lot of weird stuff in my life, but there's a very big overlap between the weird experiences reported to me by people who use meth and some of the experiences I had, and the quote-unquote targeted individual or Morgellons experiences, whatnot, right?
You mean the experiences they're having sober?
Right.
Wow.
So, like, right. So, to me, the obvious answer is that nanotechnology is involved in both the experiences, right? And so the things that are really bizarre, you know what I mean, are that are being reported to me are an effect of the nanotechnology less than they're an effect of the drugs, or that the nanotechnology, like the targeted individual experience is what is, I think, the modern day psychedelic experience, right? Like I think it's a targeted community in the same way that like the hippie movement was targeted in the 60s and 70s to observe, right? It's just different. It affects different people.
What kind of strange things are you talking about? Like high pitched ringing in the ears and like buzzes and electronic glitch kind of things, or what?
Like weirder stuff than that. Like people looking in the mirror at themselves and seeing a camera flash. Wow. Right? And the camera flash seems to be coming from somewhere inside of them. So like I one time had this guy who I met who he was an interesting guy. He had kind of escaped from Scientology, right? And his sister is a famous person. I'm not going to say who it is. And he had told me that like he was like literally in the bathroom mirror picking his face, as people on drugs sometimes do, and a flash went off, and he couldn't tell if it came from inside his skin or inside his eye, but it was very clear to him that there had been like a Polaroid camera kind of flash or something like that, right?
Fascinating.
Okay, you can literally find reports of people who like say they have Morgellons, or people who say, I don't know if you can still find them because the censorship has become so profuse, like so vast. But like back in like 2010, 11, 12, when I was really looking into these things, you could find reports of people saying the same thing, that they, they saw a flash in the mirror when they were like pulling their Morgellons or something like that out of their skin, right? Or
I haven't heard this one. Okay.
Yeah, right. Like I would hear enough of the same weird stories, right? And then at a certain point, like when I had been a couple of years clean and I had sort of feet in both worlds, I was hearing like from some people I knew from the drug scene, like who are like they had discovered the targeted individual thing and thought it was weird, right? That there was this, like, then they decided that they were, maybe I'm a targeted individual, and they didn't think it had anything to do with the drugs. And to me, it's a both thing, right? There is a technology that is being distributed amongst certain populations, and there's various ways it can enter your system. I think it's pretty widespread now. I think it's just that some people's bodies deal with it differently than others. And I think some of it is like locational, depending on where you live and like what industry you're in. There's lots of factors to it, right? But, I used to have, like for me, those things overlapped, right? Like because the end of my drug years was that like it overlapped with the awareness of some of the issues for me about like having had MK Ultra type experiences or targeted individual experiences. So there was a time when they overlapped. Maybe they always overlapped, but you can't say they are until you know that they are, right? Or you feel that they are. But there was a period of time in my life, even actually
up there.
You good?
Emily, I'm not sure if I lost you.
Okay, I'm here. So can you hear me?
There you are.
Okay. So what was the last thing you heard?
Let's see. Oh my gosh, I just now lost it. If you give me a prompt.
I was talking about like my own personal, like the overlap in my life of the drugs and the target.
That's exactly what you're talking about. So that was at that time where they were overlapping for you.
So for me, there was an overlap, and then like part of the motivation for me to get clean was so that I could figure out what the fuck was what. And I really thought that like once I got clean, that other stuff would go away, and I would realize that I had just been having some sort of drug psychosis or whatever. But that wasn't the case. It became more plainly obvious to me once I was out of the haze of drugs what was going on, right? Yeah. So, but even like years before I ever did drugs, I had that experience of like unusual things coming out of my skin and whatnot, right? That looked like unusual pieces of like little silicone technology or little metallic chips. And at the time, this was like back in the like late 90s. Like I didn't know what the fuck it was. I was just like, that's weird. How did like a piece of like metal get in my body, or a piece of? Sometimes they looked like a particular kind of like glitter, like not the really sparkly kind, but like an iridescent kind. Like if you buy like a confetti pack for a kid's party, there'd be a few of these pieces in there. It was coming. It was coming on my skin, and like I would pull one out, and then it would like a week later another one would come, and it was like it's like a fucking clown purse, dude. Just like endless amounts of things coming out of my skin, and then at some point I was able to find some information on some of this like silicone technology that people were finding in their bodies, but it wasn't quite exactly it. Well, just last week, I was reading an article about early on in the pandemic. I had like when I had Elisa E on my show, we talked about the fact that the test was the vaccine, right? And so that awareness had come up. But a few weeks ago, I found this article that was also talking about this idea that the test was really a vaccine, and they were showing in there the technology that they found on the swab, or that was on the swab, and then papers that explained what it was. It was exactly this stuff that used to come out of my skin. Exactly. Really? And it even talked, so one of the weird characteristics of some of the little pieces were all different. There was like a variety, there was like an array of technology. But there was this one kind that used to like be really hard to pull out. It would like, the more you went after it, the more it sort of like grabbed on and stuck to you, right? And they're literally talking about that technology in this article. It's called like TheraGrip technology, right? Okay. Where it like basically grabs, like will not let go of your skin. It kind of closes as it's exposed to heat and stuff like that, right? I couldn't fucking believe it. I couldn't fucking believe it that like, but of course, this was a small, I can share the article with you if you like.
Yeah, do, because I'm interested. What is the growth that is experienced with that? What's coming out, like a hair or like a wire or like a carpet? Or?
This is like a piece of like sort of I'm not 100% sure what the material is exactly, but like there are some pieces that appear to be like some kind of metallic thing, and other pieces that appear to be like silicone, right? Or some kind of crystalline kind of. I'm not an expert.
Like does it just look organic, or?
Let me see if I can. I know I have. Give me 1 second. I know I have the article on my phone. Let me send it to my email, and then I can shoot it over to you if you want. Hold on just 1 second.
Sure, yeah, go ahead. That's interesting. I wonder if anybody out there has any experience with what Emily's been talking about so far. And if you have any questions for Emily, please throw them out here. Maybe put them in all caps so that I notice them, and be happy to shout them out to her. And thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Emily's had some rabbit holes to open up already. It's great.
All right, let me find. I know I sent the article to Masaki, so let me find it, and then I can send it to myself. Let's see.
Let's see here. I'm going to show. I think this is Fallon's question here. Do you see that question, Emily?
That's tuned out for a moment. But could it be that this is happening to everyone all the time, but TIs and drug users are? Yes. So I would say, you guys know who, it's a really good question, Fallon. If you guys know who Philip K. Dick is, obvious, like a lot of people know, I think he was the first.
Oh, wow. Weird connections there. Go ahead. Synchronicity is abound right now. Go ahead.
Right. So I think that he was the first person to recognize that he was a target individual. Now, he didn't have that name for it, right? He didn't have that name for it. But the way he was describing things that were happening to him and his perception of them. So yes, I think this is something, I think that like it's much more prolific now than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So I think there are certain like groups, subcultures, whatever that maybe it was introduced into first. But yes, at this point, it is, at this point, I'd say it's fairly ubiquitous, and most people just either aren't aware of it, or I'm not sure I understand how some people notice, this stuff or not, because I notice some shit that is unbelievable to most people. All right, let me send it to,
wow.
All right, let me send it to myself, and then I will send it to you. Okay, hold on just a second. Here we go. Okay, this reminds me of my chat with James about the woman in Central California with crystals in her blood.
That opens up more questions.
So your chat with James or my chat? Who had a chat with James?
With you, it must be you.
Must be me. Fallon, you'll have to remind me of which chat. I have so many chats with people, personal and public and whatnot, that sometimes I get confused. All right, let me go email you this one here. Let's see, where is it? All right, now I just emailed it to my other email address. So let me see if I can find, let me see if yours will come up here. What's happening?
Maybe he was talking to Niche, maybe.
Okay.
Like he was.
All right, let me send this to you. Hold on a second. Now, shit, I did this in my other.
Crystals in the blood. I wonder what that looks like. I wonder because do things like gout, does that kind of equate to something like that?
Right. So, okay. So I'm having, like I told you, I'm bad at doing all this stuff at the same time. I can email it to you if you want, or if you want, I can just
do it later if you want. Or
yeah, you can put it in the description or something like that. But it's basically, so the question is about what now? Crystals. If I start doing other stuff, I lose my flow.
He saw a show, listened to a show with Niche and a guy named James about crystals. A woman had crystals in her blood.
Yeah, so like I literally used to pull things that were crystal. I still occasionally do, but I'm not bothered by it anymore. I understand what's happening in my body, whatnot. So yeah, I think that is evidence of the technology, and then also I think sometimes that can happen from like when there's been like a surge in certain frequencies. It can cause your blood to momentarily crystallize a little bit. I know somebody who has a relative with a condition that actually causes the blood to crystallize. And when that happens, he experiences temporal distortion. And when I say temporal distortion, I don't mean that like, the day seems long or short or whatever. I mean, he thinks he's in the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. And so there is something about crystals that have a temporal technological aspect, or what we perceive as technological. Right. So I think that's part of why there are crystals in watches and clocks.
That makes sense. Sure.
Right. So I think that this stuff is going on in our bodies. And so I think that I have had from the time that I was a kid through this involvement with like projects and whatnot. And then later with drugs and then later with my own drug use. And then with this environment that we live in now, that I've been having many, many, many time travel technology experiences throughout my life.
Wow.
So then you add that to what we talked about before about the array of possibilities in front of you when you wake up in the morning, right? And so like we have mirrors, like a mirror is like, it's a reflective surface. It has some similar qualities as crystalline substances and whatnot. So we're in this like prismatic Wurlitzer box kind of situation from the inside and from the outside all of the time. It's like everything is just doing like a crystalline, prismatic, like a disco ball, right? Like a disco ball in a dance club that has mirrors on the wall, right?
Cool. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, like The Last Dragon.
I don't know what The Last Dragon is.
That's a movie from the 80s.
Okay.
No, but that's okay. Wow. All right.
Now, I could be wrong, right? I could be totally wrong. But I'm going to I sent the email to the email that doesn't have your email address in it. So if you want to either send me in the chat what your email address is, I can send you the article, or you can just tell me if you don't care if people know your email address.
Oh, I don't care. If you guys have emails from anywhere you want it.
All right. So then just tell me your email address real fast, and I'll send it to you, and you can open it up on the screen, and I'll explain it to you.
Can you see it there in chat?
All right. Let me go back to the StreamYard. Let's see. It's not in the chat. I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, do you not see the group chat there?
Oh, now I see the comments. Okay. I didn't even know. I was looking in the private chat. Okay.
Oh, I could have done that. I didn't think about that.
Here we go. I'm getting this figured out right now. Here we go. Paste. There you go. I'm sending it to you right now. And if you want to open it up on the screen, I can explain to you what it is that I'm talking about and what I mean.
Groovy. Yeah, let me see if I can do that. How smooth can we make this look?
Right? Niche, Dark City. Yes, we're talking about Dark City this weekend at Conspiracy Cocktail. All the time. Yes, but yes, Fallon, I think TIs and drug users are in a height. Once you like have the perception that they're like either something is wrong or there's something going on that you're not being told about or whatever, then it activates that super observant. Some people are just naturally super observant and aware, but even like, you know, a person with average observation and awareness skills, once they become suspicious that something funny is happening, they're heightened, right? So absolutely. And then James. Who's James, Nish? James Bartley. Oh yeah, James Bartley for sure. Yeah, I haven't.
I was just digging on him recently. I know. I saw Randy with him too.
Yeah, I haven't talked to James in a long time. I was on his show a couple years back, and that's weird. Somebody like said something about that show I was on with him a couple years back earlier today. But yeah, James talks to a lot of fascinating people. He and I may have different perceptions as to like what is causing the phenomena or what the point of the phenomena are. But I think, you know, his perception is perfectly reasonable and fair, and I like to be able to have my own. So you know what I mean. So okay, so click on the link. And we'll go to the article. And I found this article on Rents. Rents.com. Rents?
Are you seeing the article now on the screen?
No, I'm just seeing the link.
Oh, it's on. That's interesting. Let me see if I can change what I'm showing. Maybe that's what I got to do. Sorry.
No worries. We're just we're having a live deep dive right now. Sometimes it's not smooth. It's more, right? Like not everything can be polished and ready for Hollywood. Yeah. All right. Okay. Right here. Okay. So this is this is what, this is the swab that they're testing people's noses with. And this is the nanotechnology that's on it.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Okay. So now look at the thing that looks like a star. Right. Okay. Yeah. So you see how there's like the I think it's a hexagon in the middle, yes. Right? And then you have these little
six-sided.
Right. Yeah, whatever it is. The six-sided, the stops, whatever that I always forget. Okay.
You're right.
Yeah. And then you have these little arms that have each 2 or 3 pieces on them. Like they each have like 3 pieces on them, right? That are slightly different shapes. Okay. So when I told you about the shape of the thing that would come out of my arm, it was that hexagonal shape, right? And then like the material that connects those pieces, it's like a translucent piece of like something plastic or silicone or something. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I would get things that came out of me that looked like little metal pieces or little silicone pieces that were the various shapes that are in that star. Go back up to the star. Scroll back up. Okay, right? They would break apart. So this is just, I'm just going way out there, right? Way out there and say this is how I think it works, right? I think that like these things are either they come in that star shape or they come separately and they organize themselves into that in the body. And then they find the area that they're meant to go and like latch onto. If you watch, like, there is a documentary that came out in like 2012 that Max Egan put together where he showed how these technologies hook on to certain like synapses, like certain areas. So okay. I think they hook on, right, and they close in this way that you're seeing here, where it's clamped around like that, right? And then I think that they are dissolvable. Either they're only meant to last a certain amount of time and then they dissolve and either come out in your skin, in your blood, in your excrement. I don't know, right? For some people, obviously, it's coming out in their skin. That they dissolve and break up into the various little pieces that you see that are attached with the sticky paper or whatever that is. That sticky paper eventually dissolves and the parts, you know, each go their own way and whatnot, right? So like that's, you know, and then when it's coming out, now I think sometimes there's parts of it that are still stuck together. So what I'm saying is that like sometimes this stuff would just come out of my skin fairly easily. But sometimes when I would go to like grab it, it would clamp on like you're seeing in that second picture. And it was almost like I was in tug of war with something that was sentient and holding on for dear life. And the name of the technology, if you scroll down in the article, is TheraGripper. They call it TheraGrip technology, gripping onto something, right? So there are patents. If you like, maybe if you can put the link if you want into the chat here. Yeah, absolutely, Nish, about the clear silicone chip and whatnot. There's about 2 or 3 articles and papers all sort of connected to each other throughout this. So if you want to put the link into the chat box or in the show description afterwards, people can go look at it themselves.
Sure, I'm working on putting it there right now. I think it's coming right now.
Yeah, but when I saw that, I was like, I finally saw what I had been looking for more than 10 years. I had been able to find things that were close and similar before, but this was exactly it, right? And so for me, the way that the things that I had to go through to rid myself of this, and I can't even be sure that it's not still in my body, was a huge cleansing of my body with diet and exercise and spirituality. And it's entirely possible it's still in my body and it's deactivated, or that I somehow have taken control of the technology, right, through some metaphysical process, or that at a certain point they just go bonk and they stay there, but they're not doing anything anymore. But yeah. So I don't even remember how we got here. How did we get here?
I don't remember. Philip K. Dick, target individuals.
We were talking about time travel.
Yeah, yeah, we were.
Yeah. So any of these kinds of devices.
I love this conversation. This is awesome, by the way.
Yeah,
I want to interject. I just have to say I'm personally blown away at this moment because every guest that I've had has brought up something that I'm just like, that is incredibly synchronistic with so many things that I've experienced that I've never heard someone talk about that like you are before. This is cool. So thank you.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and I think this is, maybe this is kind of my purpose or whatever, right? Like for a long time, we were led to believe that celebrities were special and important. And then if you liked, when you realized that the regular news media and the celebrity culture was stupid and bunk and fake, you moved to the alternative media where you were presented with these people who are awakened or super soldiers or some kind of alchemical magical wizard, and they're very, very special and different than you, and right kind of thing.
Different than you.
And I'm here to say that this shit is happening to, I can't say for sure all of us, but a lot of people. I think that everyone's a targeted individual, only some people know it. But in terms of MK Ultra projects and I think all people, almost all, I'd say between 60 to 70% of the population has been run through some kind of program. It just maybe didn't stick for them, depending on their personality type, their family structure, what their natural.
Other than the mass program that everybody goes through and all that. Other than that, you mean?
Other than that, yeah, no. I mean, I'm talking about anybody who was ever tested for a gifted and talented program at school. Yeah. Anybody.
That for hearing exams, yes, both those things. What do you think about tonsils? I wonder about that too.
All that kind of shit. Anyone who was right, anyone who had anybody who was a good athlete as a kid, or a talented musician, or did well in school, or had a learning disability, or was a genius, because they look at both of those things, right? Anybody who's received extensive testing for anything, or even just limited testing but with oddities about it, has been run through some kind of entrance exam for a project or or it could be even an exit exam, entrance or exit exam for a project or a program. And I think part of it is just how does this person, display certain characteristics that we find useful? And just because they find them useful doesn't mean you're special. Maybe this person has it's very easy to hypnotize them, right? Or they're a dunce and not that observant, so you can control them and they won't know it. So sometimes the people who feel like they weren't special because they weren't in projects, no, maybe you're not gonna fall for it. Right? There's all kinds of ways, and it isn't, there's people out there who will say, if you don't have magical metaphysical abilities, you weren't in a project. Or if you're not a super soldier and you weren't subject to satanic ritual abuse as a child, you weren't in a project or whatever. I'm here to tell you, if you went to public school, if you participated in the Girl Scouts or childhood sports, or if your parents were in any kind of like Elks Lodge, if you're a fucking human being, there's a good chance that you were involved in something. It's not special. We're all special because we're just unique individuals, right? But these people who go around and like talk about like, well, I have this ability and I have this ability, I think they've done a huge disservice to helping people like understanding how it works. Like it's like saying that like Israel is the cause of all the problems on earth, or like it's the Jesuits or whatever, right? Like it's just dumb. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my advice would be for everyone to do what they think is the right thing to do, but don't take a test, right? Well, we've never ever before, like we take tests for, like there was people take HIV tests. That would be interesting if you're actually getting the HIV when you take the test, right? That would be right. But like, like if you're not sick, there's no reason you need to take a test for something.
Exactly.
You had a cold or a flu or a sprained ankle or whatever. They didn't give me a test for it, right? Like you can't. So I think the test is bad news. And if it means you can't have a job or you can't go somewhere, you don't need to go to those places.
Right. I agree. Absolutely not. Wow.
Yeah.
And then, wow. Okay. So how far back do you think the nanotechnology has been introduced to people?
So I think in a like very like small experimental testing project, like absolute direct project, like kind of thing, probably since the 70s would be my guess, that they were giving certain people particular vaccines. And when I say certain people, I mean like maybe they decided that all the second grade classes in this area this area of the country in 1972 are going to get this vaccine that's a little different than the one everybody else gets, right? Or we're going to give people this weird pink pill for them to swish around in their mouth so they can see if they have plaque on their teeth.
I remember those, yes.
Right? Okay, so I think that kind of stuff, and then also like if you were definitely in like some kind of more advanced kind of project, like whatever, like something could have been introduced there. I think there's I can't. I mean, this is going to sound super fucking weird, but I don't know if you're at all familiar with the scandal with Larry Nassar and the gymnastics, and they had this doctor that was sexually molesting all the kids.
I'm familiar with that. Yes, I used to teach gymnastics.
I'm trying to understand in my head if he was there to put implants in or take implants out, right? Because an area that he was quote unquote working on some of these girls is an area of my body that I removed an implant from, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, right. So that I'm not saying that's the truth, but that's just what my mind is doing with it. The truth, it's true. I removed it from my body. I don't know if that's what's going on with these girls, but to me, it's certainly like a possibility. And the fact that you have this like horny guy who likes doing it. Like the point is not that he is a pervert, although that was a feature of the operation, right? Kind of thing. Sure. So like that kind of stuff. So I'd say from the 70s would be where I would say it was being experimented with privately. And then I'd say in the 90s into the early to mid 2000s is where they were doing like a subculture experiment on it in terms of putting it like maybe in the drug cultures. Or people who maybe like
all the raves and stuff.
Like, well, no, I think mostly it was like in meth. I think it was in meth.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was in like meth. And if you like, that's the 90s is really when meth started to become very popular, and then it's just expanded. And it is the way it's dealt with like legally and with enforcement is very, very different than other drugs. In that it's like this weird thing where all the ingredients for it are legal and you can buy it at the hardware store, but if you have the end product, it's illegal. There's a lot of weird things about it that differentiate it from other drugs, right? So I think that it was introduced. I'm sure there are other subcultures it was introduced into. I'm just not familiar with what they are. So like maybe there's an industry where there's like a factory component to some sort of resin or something like that, and they may have included it there. So people who are working, building some kind of thing, their skin took it on as well, right? And maybe these are some of the people who we find like, they had environmental issues in their factories, and so now they have a health problem that they think is supposedly from the environmental issue, but it was there. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, but I don't mean I'm making it up like it's a lie. Like, I'm just trying to imagine what it could be. So I think there was a few subcultures that were unwittingly experimented upon, and then I think it went vastly public in the mid to late 2000s, probably.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Wow. So, but how did you? You don't have to go into any detail at all, wherever you're comfortable with. But how did you come to know that you needed? How did you come to find that you had that you needed to take it out, and how to do it?
Okay, so I mean, part of it was just like, part of it was like, I was a tweaker, and I was like constantly picking at myself and looking, and eventually, like, but it used to just be like, okay, you fucking had like a zit or an ingrown hair or some shit like that, and then all of a sudden there's all this weird stuff, right? And there's an element to this Morgellons thing that is like, it's partially a disease of awareness. And it's actually a clue to how powerful of manifestors we are, because I would have these weird fucking experiences where I'd like fall down like a Sophia Smallstorm rabbit hole, right?
I was just thinking that Sophia Smallstorm. I was going to say something about her to you.
Yeah, I'd be looking at something she did. Right? So it would send me somehow to a link where there was pictures of things that people had sent her or some other Morgellons board, where all these little artifacts they had pulled out of their body. Right? So I'd be reading that shit, and then I would literally go to the bathroom, and that would be the next thing that would come out of my skin. It's like, to me, that was the most terrifying part of this, is it like literally seemed to have like a consciousness component to it. Now, like,
oh my God, okay, all right.
Right? But like, there was these weird little things that looked like some kind of technological mosquito, some kind of like, there was a few weird, really weird like things that like, and multiple people you can find, I don't know if you can still find, but like, you could find people talking about this stuff, right? That like, and tape with their pictures, and I don't, there are different people than me and whatever. So like, that was a weird thing to me. And so I had to stop looking at it, because I realized that like there was an element of manifestation happening with it.
Yeah, it's perpetuating it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the weirdest one was one time like I had like gouged some huge hole in my face, right, and it was like bleeding, right, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and all of a sudden it just closes. It just literally closes in front of my eyes. You could still see underneath that there had been some blood, but like the skin was like, it was like there had been like a plastic thing go over it or something. Later, I saw a technology like that on the TV show Fringe. So if they're talking, I'm sure probably there's some place where a technology that like the skin heals real fast exists. But that like, it was the weirdest and most terrifying thing. And that to me, I think like that started this whole like, this is too crazy for me. I need to stop looking at this stuff first of all, and I need to like figure out what's really going on here. And I think it took me a couple of years still, but eventually, sort of by happenstance, because I was starting to have some health issues, I landed on an interview with a woman named Anne Baroque, who was an expert in Candida. And I went to see her as a client. And the discovery that I made is that these things like to grow in the same environment in the body that Candida causes, like that Candida environment. They like sugar. Right, they really like sugar and gluten.
We're talking about that, yeah.
Yeah, and so to the point where, like, when I started to see some of like the like microscopic pictures of like parasites and yeasts and fungus and molds and stuff, like they looked very similar to the stuff that had come out, but like less mechanistic. So remember earlier we were talking about like so it's like the difference between a 5G tower and a real tree, right? Yeah. So I think that some of this Morgellons stuff is kind of like a synthetic version of like Candida or parasites or the like electronic parasites.
Oh, okay.
Like if you look into like Cliff Carnicom's work, he'll refer to them as cross-domain bacterias, right? And to me, I don't know exactly what he means by that, but to me, the cross in the domain would be like, or biological and technological. right?
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yeah, so it's like, I think, an early like attempt at transhumanism.
Wow.
Right. So right, and the body, it's kind of like what's happening in the body as the technological components and the biological organic components meet and try and see what they're going to work out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people's bodies reject them, and some people's bodies assimilate them more easily. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then, you're off to the races from there. But once I cleaned up my diet and stopped doing drugs, I stopped having a lot of so first I stopped doing drugs, and I was still having a lot of the like really, really physical symptoms that went along with it. There was less paranoia because I was now clear on what it was, and I didn't have this other element in my body that was revving things up and causing problems and whatever. But then once I really cleaned up my diet and got really, honest with myself and came into alignment and things, it just started to become something that was happening to me, but it wasn't something I was emotionally wrapped up in. And eventually it got to the point where I still occasionally will have an oddity like that, but it's very rare. And to me, it's almost like, this is interesting. It's just evidence. I'm not bothered by it. My best advice to people who are, feel like that they're targeted or harassed, or that they have Morgellons or something like that, is like, whatever needs, clean up your diet, first of all.
Clean up your diet. Yes.
A lot of it. And then clean up your relationship with yourself, and then just fucking get used to it and find a way to become humored by it. Because the more humorous I find it, the less I don't know if it's that it's happening less, or I just don't care that it's happening, so I don't notice. Right. But, I don't like railing against it in this, we have to prove to everybody that it's happening and we have to make them stop it and whatever. Like that's only a road to frustration. And it's something that you don't personally have control over. You can only change yourself and how you respond to things. And you as a yogi absolutely know that.
Agreed, for sure. It's funny, you're saying that. This is kind of a funny thing, but that whole thing just made me remember when I was a kid, do you remember the Bionic Man?
I've heard of it, but I don't know. I've never watched it.
Okay, well, it was a show on TV, and anyway, they had toys for the Bionic Man. They had these little figures, and they had these little pieces of skin you could peel back, and little bionic chips you could put in and take out, like a surgery.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's crazy. And I gotta agree with you with the diet and the cleaning up of chemicals and substances and things that aren't fitting in your psychological and emotional life and stuff. That opens up the whole world, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're not going to stop doing 5G, right? And the fact that I'm not bothered by it doesn't mean that I agree with it or that I'm okay with it, right? Like, they're doing that, and there's this whole series of things that we identify as problems that it's causing, but there are also side effects that are happening that may be to our advantage, like increased telepathy, different kind of things. And then within this technology, it's like, it's a world of, when you have a computer, if you don't know how to use it, right, but you leave it on all day and so it gets hacked into or surveilled or whatever, like, you're just like, what the fuck? But once you understand how it works and you learn how it works and you learn how to use it and you use it for the things you want and you understand how to install antivirus software, or that you need to clean your computer out, your files out every so and so often or whatever, then suddenly, like, you start to have more control over your computer. It's the same kind of thing. Garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put shitty oil in your engine, then it doesn't run well, right?
Yeah. So, those things, and they don't have anything. I feel like I get the feeling they don't have anything to cling to in my system sometimes.
It's that, right? Like or the other thing is, when you are generating such a the exact vibration of who you are, like, where these things, whether they be physical, mechanical things or spiritual, etheric kinds of things, they dig into us where there's a weakness, right? And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect, right? But like, when you feel shitty about yourself, or you told a lie, or you did a shady thing or whatever, there's like these little holes that you get, like Swiss cheese, right? But when you are like completely in yourself and vibrating your radiation out, that doesn't mean you're perfect, but you are pushing your energy out into the world instead of like cowering from the energy that's coming at you. These things have a harder time holding on to you, like getting stuck, or even if they're there, like if they're powered by like fear or anxiety or shitty food or alcohol or whatever the fuck they're powered by, if you're not feeding it that, then it's just there. It's kind of like when there's, something, in your space, it's not doing anything. It's just there. It's, whatever. So there's a number. Yeah, there's a number of ways to deal with this shit, right? But most of it, like, generally, like, once a person has, like, done all the things that you can do that are part of personal, like, responsibility, they're usually by that point not bothered by it anymore. Or if they are, it's fairly minor, and what to do about it either becomes interesting or obvious.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can see symptoms or manifestations, but you're not bothered by it, as you say. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So like one of the things.
What kind of diet do you follow currently?
So currently I cycle. I cycle carnivore right now.
Cool. Okay.
Like I've done I got like my body really clean with a particular diet for candida, right? And then eventually after like I did that for a couple of years, pretty hardcore. And then I tinkered around with paleo. That didn't really work for me. I got into keto for a really long time. It was highly effective for me. And then I had a total change of lifestyle and I had an injury. And so like suddenly that didn't work for me anymore. And it took me a while to sort of come to terms with and figure that out. And then it may work for me again, right? Like it's kind of been a long-term injury that I'm trying to deal with. And, like I require for the keto diet to really work well for me, it requires me to be like at my better athletic level than I am right now due to the injury.
Yeah, I'm feeling you. I'm hurting from that level of things right now. Yes.
So I decided like mostly just to experiment because like everybody was talking about it about a year ago, about the carnivore diet and whatever. I'm like, at first I dismissed it. I'm like, this shit sounds dumb, but then it didn't go away. And people were asking me about it. I'm a nutrition consultant. And so clients were wanting to know about it. I was like, all right, I better try it and see what's going on with this. So I committed to doing it for 30 days. And it was very, very powerful and effective. So I ended up staying on it pretty much for about 5 months straight. And then since then, I've kind of go on and off it just based on like when I travel or, different things. Or if I get bored with it, I just take a break, and then go back. So I'd say that I'm on like an 80 to 90% carnivore diet right now. And I'm sure that it will change again in the future. Like if we don't wake up in the same reality every day, why would we always be finding use and effectiveness from the same diet? The only diet I don't think that there is any use for other than a brief short cleanse, in my opinion, is a vegan diet. And I say that having been a vegan and also having been a vegetarian for 15 years. And ultimately the vegetarian thing didn't work well for me, but I know people who it does work well for, including clients of mine and whatnot. But the vegan diet, there's no scientific or modern case for it. It's a modern diet. There's no historical case for it. I'm sorry, no modern case for it. So I never recommend that to people, although I respect and honor the moral reasons why people do that if it works for them.
I feel almost identically to how you do on all of those fronts. I went vegan and vegetarian for a while, and it's fine. And morally, I really dig it. But yeah, there are other things work better for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know that like a lot of people I know who've had issues with Morgellons and that kind of stuff. When I told them I was going on the carnivore diet, they were like, oh, well, what happens because the acidity of that, like I've heard that Morgellons really likes acidity, and I didn't have any kind of flare up or anything like that. I know that Morgellons like sugar. You know what I mean? Like, and when you're on a carnivore diet, there is no sugar. So,
right.
Yeah.
Same with keto. I love it. I love no sugar. No sugar is awesome.
It is. I mean, I don't like, there's no, like, to me, the getting off of sugar was harder than getting off drugs. Once I got off sugar, getting off drugs was easy. Like, I for some reason, maybe we can, I was going to say, let's go back to looking at each other. I tried for many years to get off of drugs and couldn't. But once I got off of sugar, the very next time I tried to get off drugs, I did. So I think there's a huge connection between those things. Like there is a school of thought that alcoholism and drug addiction are just advanced forms of sugar addiction, or what's known as like saccharin or low blood sugar disease. So
I believe it. I quit drinking too a few years back, and it was, yeah, I could see that very much.
Yeah. I do like the occasional cocktail here and there. I'm not going to lie, but you know, if you drink it every day, it's a steady stream of sugar to your body. It's no different than eating candy every day. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. I've been seeing you take notes there. So do you have some questions?
All kinds of things for me to look up later, things for me to go back to with you and stuff, and weird little synchronicities and stuff like Philip K. Dick. I mean, there's so many, but I was really into Blade Runner when I was a kid. I went to see it in the theaters, and I dragged my dad to see it too, and he was very he didn't care about it at all. Funny enough, he's buried in the same cemetery as Philip K. Dick.
That's really maybe he cares about it now.
Yeah, they have talks about Blade Runner now, probably. I have my own personal Mandela Effect.
Let's hear it. And then I want to go back to Philip K. Dick for a second, but let's hear Mandela Effect first.
Okay, cool. And all the nanotechnology and the Morgellons and all that stuff is fascinating. We can go back there too anytime. But you know what a spaghetti squash is?
Yeah.
So I went looking for spaghetti squash at Costco a few years back, and they had some, but they also had these really bright orange looking ones. And I was like, what is that thing? That looks pretty interesting. And I looked at it, it was called an orangetti. And it was it was a bright orange spaghetti squash, and it was a spaghetti squash crossed with something, I forget what. But I was like, cool, let's check it out. I had a date the next night. I cooked it for her and she was like crazy for it. She's like, I want this thing. What is this? I've never had anything this good. And it did have a very unique flavor. Went back to Costco to get some the next day. They didn't have any. Asked about it. They never heard of it. They called around. They couldn't find it in their inventory anywhere. I've looked for it since. It's never existed as far as I can tell. But one time I did look it up and I found some strange reference to how it was crossbreeded, but that's it.
Okay, so that opens up something interesting, and that is, what the fuck is Costco?
Oh, Costco is like a group membership warehouse.
No. I know what Costco is. I have a membership. Okay. But on a larger scale, what the fuck is Costco? Right? So Costco finds itself largely at the center of this pandemic.
Yes, they do, right?
Right? When we first started seeing all those videos of people waiting, like clearing the shelves of toilet paper and waiting in line, and right, it's like one of the main hubs of like the mask policy. A few weeks ago, there was a picture of the guy the video of the guy getting arrested at Costco for not because his disabled son didn't have a mask on and stuff like that. Now, Costco's
David Weiss, they rejected his membership they mailed it back to him, said, no thanks, you don't want to wear the mask.
Who?
David Weiss.
Oh, the flat Earth guy.
Flat Earth guy, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
he's still very anti-mask. So.
Yeah. So okay. I watched a video like years and years ago, early 2000s, of this guy that like Alex Jones used to have. He was on the Alex Jones show. This was back in the early 2000s, right? Like maybe not early 2000s, like maybe 9, 10, 11, something like that, right?
Just before my awakening. So
he was talking about how like Costco was like a really important part of like our slave training to get us used to showing our papers, please, because you have to show your card to get in and you have to show your receipt to get out, right? So people would get used to like having to get permission or okayed or whatever, right? And of course, the lure of doing these things that would, to most Americans, feel like, you know, what the fuck is this shit? Is this, you're gonna get a lot of stuff for really cheap, and you're gonna get stuff that like not everyone can get everywhere. And so then you also get to feel special that you got this deal on. Like there's all these little like rewards, these little like buzzes or adrenaline hits or whatever that you can get from the Costco experience, right? But you go in there and it's
gold star members,
all that shit, gold star, fucking whatever, right? So you go in there and it's like just like a warehouse. It's like white walls and a polished concrete floor, right? So like, what else has those characteristics, right? Jail, military built installations, underground bases, warehouses where like raves and parties happen, happen, right?
Oh,
Like manufacturing, all this kind of stuff. Like it's like a mill type of thing, right? And there's a lot of line waiting in there and a lot of just checking and showing and verification. It's very like, slave labor training kind of whatever, right? Type thing. Yeah. The other thing, I one time, you guys are going to laugh, but like when I was in not a very good space, I was in Austin at the time and I like needed a job really bad, right? And someone told me that like Costco paid really well and they had great benefits. So I applied for and got a job, right, at Costco. And because I had a lot of food, restaurant experience and stuff, they put me like in the food area. And one of the I worked there for 2 days, and then I was like, "Fuck this shit." What I had to do was like, you know how they sell those roasted chicken at the roasted chickens there? Yeah, well, they also make like chicken salad and chicken salad sandwiches. And
out
so
of the roast chickens,
right like they're actually really good with like how recent and fresh their chickens are and stuff. But the chickens are only out for a few hours, and then if they don't sell, they pull them back and they use that stuff to make the other stuff. Right? They don't leave the chicken sitting out though. But when they take the chickens apart, they call it harvesting. I had never heard that term before in any other sense than like what the farmers or ranchers do with the crops. Like it was before I was aware of like energy harvesting or emotional harvesting or ballot harvesting or any of this. They fucking like they're harvesting. That was the fuck. I was like, what? I'm supposed to do what to the chicken? And that was when I was like, bye, I'm leaving, right? And they also, the other thing that they do, they wash their facilities, their food making facilities, the same way that like they hose people down like at like slave labor camps or prisons. They have like this massive water that comes down from the ceiling and stuff all over the counters. I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm out of here. Right? So there's something very non-human about the Costco experience. And so the fact that like something like that happened now, which also brings us back to one of the main topics of what we're talking about today, which is like this like temporal fuckery, right? Like this time kind. So like to me, it would make sense that there's a lot of that the Costco's are put on certain locations because there's energy there that lends itself to compliance or obedience or mind control, right? Because you see people act in ways that they would never normally act at a Costco, right?
You sure do.
Yeah, right. Okay, and so like if that energy exists, if you're on a ley line, I'd say ley lines, while they may be good for harvesting and mind control, they're probably also good for like time domain or time control technology.
Fascinating.
Right?
Sure.
So your squash experience there is probably not surprising, right? So you probably had a drift off into another reality, like a slightly, probably not too far off. You didn't wander into someplace totally foreign, but that's the kind of thing that you would expect in the next reality over that, like they have a hybrid crop that we didn't do here, right? Like here we have Rocca flower and, what are some of the other ones that are broccolini or what's the one that is like part asparagus, part broccoli. We have part cauliflower, part broccoli. We have all these weird like fusions. We have plucots and stuff like that, right? So in that one, they had orange getty, which is like some probably combination of, either a plain orange squash and spaghetti squash, or maybe even the fruit in orange in a squash.
Right. I think it
probably had a sweetness to it or something. So maybe it was almost like a yam or something, right? Who knows?
Right.
But that's really interesting. Now, does the girl remember this, or does she think she just had spaghetti squash?
No, she was on the hunt for it too. She was madly doing her research. She couldn't find it either.
Okay, so that
so last time I saw her, we were joking about it. We're like, "Did you ever find an orangetti?"
Yeah.
No.
Right? Yeah. So now then when you find one again, because I'm confident you will, right? Like you have to ask yourself both questions. It can't just be, proof that it exists and I finally found it, Costco got it back in, or is it
reality
I just returned to the reality in which I saw it before, right?
Yeah.
And so then you have all these new doors that open up from those considerations. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. And now that you mention it, there are a couple of just kind of weird things, and definitely a lot of I've been to that store a lot, that particular Costco, and it is actually very close to where I live right now, and I have never lived this close to it. But anyway, yeah. So that's interesting that temporal fuckery being a part of the geographical location. I find that fascinating.
And where does Costco come from?
It came out of nowhere. I used to work when I was a kid. I worked at a place called Sam's Club, and it was very similar. And that evolved into something else. And
Right.
then it Pace, and then that evolved into Sam's, and then now it's Costco.
Right. Okay, but where do you know where it comes from?
Like physically, really?
Like where the headquarters is that that emerged from? The same Kirkland, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, which is basically the same place that coronavirus emerged from in the United States. It's the same place that Bill Gates emerges from in the United States. It's the same place that this Space Needle is. It's the same place that Windows, Microsoft, right? Like all those headquarters are there, right?
Wow.
So, yeah.
I did not know this.
And so, right, and remember that Bill Gates gave us both viruses and antivirus software, right? And so now he wants to give it to us in our body.
But anyway, go ahead.
Now he wants to give it to us in our body, right? Yeah. And if you go back into some of my early work, when I was talking about sugar as programmable matter, you can hear me talking about the fact that sugar has windows in it. And by windows, I meant the operating system, right? Now, so do the vaccines, which the mRNA vaccines are delivered using a needle made out of sugar, right? And so all of these things time together. So I think sugar also is partly a temporal, like a temporal narcotic of sorts, right? Things are all wound together, and a lot of the emanation of that stuff is out of that area of Washington.
Wow.
There you go.
Defund Gates.
Right.
Man, okay, the synchronicities just never cease to amaze me. That's wild.
All right, what else you got?
Let's see here. What do you think about, so back in the 70s, that's when I was growing up, and I had some medical experiences and stuff, but it's not about me right now. But I am wondering, a lot of us had our tonsils removed in the 70s, and I wonder if you've ever heard anything about that.
So first of all, like, since you're new in this endeavor of doing podcasting and videos, like, don't hesitate to make it personal. I actually think that that's the thing. Like, people want to know about you, whether it be, if your guest isn't an arrogant asshole, they'll like to know about you. And the audience, that's really where you get your loyal followers and listeners, is by sharing of yourself. Right, kind of thing. So, like, there's a few interviewers out there who don't do much sharing of themselves, and that seems to work for them. But even over the years, eventually they get into that, right? So, like, don't ever be afraid to share your personal stories. As for the tonsils coming out, I didn't have my tonsils taken out, but I was jealous of the kids who did. So I find that weird, right? Like, I felt like they were somehow more special than me because they got. Now, it's entirely possible it was because they got to eat ice cream for a week and I just wanted the ice cream. I can't remember. It could be the ice cream and the popsicles or whatever. Or
I never had braces. I felt the same way about kids like braces, but it was because of the dolly thing from Moonraker. Oh, Mandela Effect again. So,
I didn't have braces either. And I can't say I wanted the braces, but I wanted the retainer for sure. I don't know why. The tonsils thing, like, maybe it was that they got to miss a week of school, but those kids also always had strep throat. I never had strep throat. And so, like, right, like, strep throat was always good with these kids for like a week or two a year, every year off of school, whether it came all at once or it was broken up a couple times. Sometimes they got it repetitively, right? So the question has to be, so first, like, okay, I always thought, oh, no fair, so-and-so is not at school and I have to come and blah, 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 right? But, like, what was going on for them during those days or weeks where they were off of school?
In the hospital and stuff, usually.
Yeah, right.
If we were home recovering, I don't remember.
Remember, because all that, like, they would get fed grape popsicles and some sort of coating syrup for that. What the fuck was in that shit? Right? Like,
right?
Like, some of my memories where I, like, have missing time from, like, the daycare center would come after, like, grape juice or some kind of weird tasting candy or something like that, right?
That's where I got addicted to grape juice, for sure.
Yeah, what Nish is saying here, she was jealous of the kids that did too, but for the reason of not having to be in school. And then yes, the ice cream and special care, absolutely. You know what I mean? So so that. But yeah, I never had any of those things. But absolutely, now to me, this is gonna like when I say I thought this when I was a kid, but I'm not saying this is what it is. For me, when I was little, I thought the tonsils were some sort of like medical device or technology.
I've wondered that.
That's what I thought they were when I was a kid. So I thought when somebody, like, I guess maybe like I thought it was like when you get your braces off. So when you get your tonsils out, it's like getting the braces off, or like
wisdom teeth out, or
something like that, right? Like, so, maybe it is some kind of earlier technology.
Oh, I see what you mean. More like the braces in that it's a tool of some kind or a device.
Right. Like maybe it could be like a more like primordial one, like a more something that's a natural part of our physical technology. And on some people that mechanism breaks down based on
appendix.
Or whatever, right? The appendix also. Okay, when I was little, I thought the appendix was like a tool too. Because didn't you ever play Operation when you were a kid? So I thought all of if you've seen the movie Wizard of Oz and you've played the game Operation, it's not a far stretch for the kids to think that like we have these little machines inside of our body that you can put in and remove. And if you touch the sides when you're going for them, there's going to be a buzz and whatever, right? So I think there's like a degree of truth, right? These things that we think of as games or stories all have varying degrees of truth in them, right? So yeah. I loved Operation when I was little, and the appendix was my favorite one to take out.
I say that so often, yeah.
I've never had my appendix taken out either, right? So here's like a weird thing about like me and my family. So I'm the only person in my family, in any portion of my family, that didn't have glasses or braces. My mom, my sister, my dad, most of my cousins, all that kind of stuff either had glasses or braces or both, right? And my dad had his appendix removed. I don't know who else in my more extended family has. I haven't had my appendix removed. But it's weird, right? Like
all around you, like that.
Yeah. So like some of my mechanical parts work better than their mechanical parts. Like, and I'm way different than all of them. They're all into the same shit. I'm into totally different shit. So I don't know if that's the case for like I'm not really part of the family, or that like my technology functions differently than theirs, or better or worse or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So there's no one else in my family that quite understands what I'm talking about. You obviously do, right? So
there's no one in my family anymore, but they wouldn't understand either at all. Not at all. Where I'm at. Let's see. You said something about families of elks and masons. I mean, you didn't say masons, but I was thinking about masons.
The same thing. Yeah. The mason one is obvious, right? So I went for something a little less obvious. But yes.
I actually have I have adult synchronicity with the Elks Club in a strange way too, funny enough. But my family, there's masonry in my family too that I've discovered that I'm starting to learn more about. But it was actually pretty big in my great grandfathers and whatever. So I'm just wondering, and do you have any of that in your family? Can I ask?
So I have if I ask my dad, were you a Mason, or was your dad a Mason, or was anyone in your family a Mason? He's going to tell me no, but I find evidence that something else is the truth, and I don't know if it's that he's lying to me. My guess would be that he's not lying to me. My guess would be that he is not aware of it, on a certain level. Then on my mom's side of the family, she isn't she says that her dad was not a Mason, but I believe he was a Mason. He worked for the War Department, and then he was a banker after that. And she was in Job's Daughters as a child, which is like masonry for children. And she used to play the piano at the Masonry Lodge, or the Eastern Star Lodge, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that. Now, like where it gets a little confusing is that my mom's side of the family is German and Dutch. It's very easy to find that lots of those people are Masons, but my father's family is Jewish, and there's not as much like, oh, you know about all those Jewish Masons. You don't hear about all, I'm sure, right? So I think but I do think that there's either something else that's different but the same, or they're Masons too, and they just don't acknowledge it. It's not necessarily, they're quiet about it or whatever, right? But I find all of the same evidences and markers and telltale clues of that in my family. And I also I'm constantly updating my idea of what I think Masonry actually is.
Really?
Right? Yeah, right. And so
you have to. Yeah, go ahead. Anyway, I do too, because it's constantly evolving what's coming out about it.
Right. So obviously there's the varying levels, and on a certain level it's a social club, and on another level it's about constructing, erecting, stone buildings and things like that. And then there's the, very storied inner and upper levels, right? And what are they doing? What kind of high magic are they practicing, and what secrets are they occulting?
Yes.
And I think what it really is it's basically like how to erect a Masonic floor or a Masonic lodge around you wherever you are. And that if you can create this sort of spatial or temporal board around yourself, you can create a reality there, or you can move between realities. And
wow. No, wait a minute, because I've had experience with sacred geometry work that I do and stuff like that. But okay, so you're saying, where did you come through this understanding? And then please go on with it.
So okay, it's been a long time, right? So I was exposed to a lot of things as a child that were Masonic in nature, right? And they always have to do with checkerboard floors and shit like that, right? Okay.
Yes.
So then I also I dance, I like to dance, and I over the years have become very aware that sometimes you can't, it's hard sometimes to go, okay, I know if I do this movement, and this movement, I'm going to find myself in a different place. But when it happens, it's like, oh, what the fuck just happened? I'm in a different place, right?
Yeah.
Hard sometimes to replicate it, right? I had one night particularly at a party where it happened 3 or 4 times, and I was able to sort of identify what the parameters or the rules were for that space. And it's different in every space because the energy, the geometry, you have to pay attention to the geometry of the room you're in, the energy, the vibration, and then what you're doing with your body and how you are maneuvering yourself in space, in that space, and working with the vibrational elements that you have. But
what's going on and stuff too.
Right.
Yes,
so
I get it.
I figured it out that night, that there were certain parameters to that, right? I haven't been able to replicate quite the same in and out repetitive experience before, but it's happened on other times where it's oh, wait a second, I'm suddenly in a fucking different place. Okay, that's fucking weird. Now I'm back. All right. But the confirmation for some of that really came through, because you feel something and then you know it in yourself, and then when you see evidence of it somewhere else that matches exactly, then they're either trolling you, Hollywood, or they're giving a reveal that is true. That for some people they think that seems too sick, too fantastic. That's bullshit. They know most people are going to think it's bullshit, but because you've had the experience, it's true. So when the television shows, the OA came out, well, first the television, there's 3 television shows that have had scenes that are indicative of this, and that's Fringe, when Walter steps into the pocket universe by doing a series of steps on a floor, that if you look at a diagram of how to draw a Masonic floor, it's a pretty close match to the steps that he did.
Wow, right? Okay. I haven't seen this, but okay. So
with his body, he drew a Masonic floor in a building that had a loose, the energy, the veil of energy between that and another world was thin already, right? So there was that reveal. And then in the television show, or the Netflix show, the OA, you had this group of kids who were doing these various movements and making sounds, and it was allowing them to move through levels of reality, right? And that one, I'd say, was a really close match to some of the things I'd experienced dancing. And then there's another show called The Magicians where you have these kids who
I heard about
things with their hands that match up to a style of dancing that I used to do called tuts. And then there's a style of dancing called finger tuts that looks like. I
mentioned tut earlier. Do you remember? Did you hear that?
Yes, I heard you say yes. I was a tutter. I'm a tutter or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah. And so, and also my experiences with both doing tutting and watching other tutters and understanding that they are pulling apart seams into other spaces. And if you catch a glimpse of one, you'll never forget it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very reminiscent of things I've been involved with. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now I got to look into more of that.
It's like, depending on how you perceive reality, for some people, it's easier to see it watching voguing. Like with vogue, you can see it, voguing, tutting, turfing, like bone breaking. Like there's a number of names for these styles of dancing, and it's different for different people where they can sort of see it. But yeah. So through those, go ahead.
Go right ahead.
So through those confirmations from media sources, right? Which the only reason that I trust them is because they matched up to an experience I had, right? It's not like, oh, I saw those and then I tried to go have the experience and then I thought maybe I had. No, it was not. This was like, oh yeah, that fucking happened to me. That's for sure it, right? And you see versions of it and other things that aren't exactly it, and because you've experienced it, right? So, so I think, and then with, sacred geometry ties into this on a certain level. But I think that the sacred geometry is super important to understand. It's lots of truth to it, but I also think that it can be a diversion, a distraction, a rabbit hole, because I think that the popular sacred geometry teachers don't ever go near the most important shape, which I think is the quatrefoil.
Quatrefoil. What is this one again?
The quatrefoil it's like some people refer to it as a four-lobed shape, right? It's very, very common in mid-century modern architecture's concrete masonry units.
I'll look one up real quick while you're talking. How do you spell it again?
Quatrefoil. So you're going to get a lot of things that aren't what I'm talking about. So if you just Google quatrefoil and then show the images, you can pull it up. And when you get to it, I'll show you I'll say that's the one. Quatrefoil is Quatrefoil.
I see. Kind of like a trefoil cookie. I'll try to share my screen though. A Girl Scout trefoil.
So when you pull it up, I'll tell you. So I think that this quatrefoil shape, it's also so go to the images.
Oh yeah.
Images, and then scroll down. Start scrolling slowly. Right there. Okay, so go back up. So the one right there with the four right there with the four circles. Go up a little bit. Up, just a tiny bit. No, the other way. I'm sorry. Down. One more. A little bit more. Right there. So the second from the right for you, that one right there. No, you were on it before. That one, right there. So it's four circles.
That's like a Pisces. Okay.
Okay. So right. It's similar, but it's that four-lobe shape right there that is highlighted in the drawing of a Masonic floor. It's also, in my opinion, the vibrational wallpaper of the realm that we live in. And see the dot in the middle where the four lobes come together. Okay, yes. There's a fifth element there, which this is also the four domes and then the middle dome in those Tartarian buildings. The middle point is the fifth element, and you have to penetrate through the middle. The fifth element penetrates through there, and it allows you to move between realities.
Oh my God!
Find this in sound and light diagrams, right? You can find this in the Masonic floor drawings, in the diagrams of Walter Russell for his free energy machine, all that kind of stuff.
I of course have seen this before, but never pondered it this closely. I've looked at other.
All these other versions of it are equally valid. They're encoding it everywhere. But for the practitioner's purposes, the one that I showed you is the easiest one to work with. It's also the one that throws off the best light spectrum, and the various when you're observing that, in the visionary space, it's really important that you be able to see all the colors that are created by both the light and the dark. And it's easier to find in that iteration of the quatrefoil than in the others. But if you see that 4 lobes in the middle, like the outer parts of the circle look like the other versions of the 4 lobes. So it's all encoded. Everything, all the information is within that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That's
right, what's going on here? Now I'm starting to like the chat room. I usually don't look at chat while I'm doing shows, but it's now I'm starting because there's just you and me and Nish and sometimes Fallon in there. It's not a lot to keep track of, and I'm already in sync with Nish. So
yeah.
Yep, her grandmother founded an Eastern Star Lodge in Nebraska, of course.
That was me, yeah.
The AI called Tyler and the role of Tyler in this, absolutely, like Tyler, Taylor, all of these names are sort of different variations. When you hear names that are sort of similar or variations on each other, they're really talking about sort of the same thing, absolutely. My uncle changed his name intentionally to Taylor from a name that sounded nothing at all like Taylor, Yes. Wow. Anywho, all right. What else you got? What's next on your list? Or just what else? What else can I entertain you with? I'm gonna turn the light on here.
Well, you can. I mean, there's all kinds of things, and let's see here. I think we kind of circled around to most of the things that were just nagging at me, but Mandela effects. Let's go back to that because that's kind of fun.
All right.
And that has to do with the temporal fuckery and stuff like that. At first, I resisted Mandela effects, but even when I first heard about it, I knew that I had experienced some in my own life already, but I never really, like so many other weird experiences, I just kind of went, I don't know, for some reason I swept them under the rug. But what about you? Do you have personal experience? I mean,
yeah. The Mandela effect. The Mandela effect was one of these things that we talked about that I actually didn't reject offhand, because the first time I heard about it in the mimetic sense was with the Berenstain Bears, right? And like that one was a no-brainer for me because I'm Jewish and I know that it was like Bernstein, like a Jewish person, right? It wasn't like Bernstein, right? Or Berenstain. Like I'm like, no, that's like I was like, what the fuck? So to me, that wasn't a hard sell on that one. And then, like I knew that it was mirror, mirror on the wall, not fucking magic mirror on the wall, right? Like
that's written down right here. I was gonna make a joke about that when you're talking about the mirrors.
Yeah. So a lot of those made sense to me. I think my issue with the Mandela effect is the name it was given.
I know, right?
Yeah, I think the more appropriate name for it would be the Mandela effect.
That's interesting because it is a lot like that.
The Mandela effect, because the mandala is kind of like a fractal of sorts, right? You have like this whole that has all these little geometries and parts in it that all have like a piece of the bigger picture going on inside of them, right? Like you have like 100, like if the big mandala is like the universe or whatever, then all the little parts of the mandala are like different worlds within that, and they all have some elements that the others kind of have or a relation to them, but are slightly different, right? Mm-hmm. And like one of the things that when the world started getting really weird for me was when I discovered mandalas, right? Which was long before we heard about the Mandela effect. And how I discovered mandalas was like, I came at it from two directions. So I had started having some visions behind my eyes when I would have a psychedelic experience or when I was dancing. Like I had started closing my eyes, which is something I hadn't done before, right?
I've done that. Okay.
I did that, and I started seeing these things that I didn't know what they were. So in the beginning they were pretty simple, and they became much more complex until now it's like a visual show like you'd never be able to see in front of your face, right? But when I went looking for what they were, like one of the things that like I found that matched some of it were these mandalas, right? And what was funny is similarly I had lost my brother or stepbrother in a sudden, tragic, unexpected way. And I just was a mess. And during that period of time, I picked up a couple of not unusual hobbies, but unusual for me. They were different than anything I had done before. One was like photography of flowers, and the other was coloring. I hadn't colored since I was little. And I started like being attracted to coloring mandalas, right? I didn't even know that was what they were called. I just like would see the pictures on the internet and pull them down and start coloring them. And like later I read an article that said that like actually they use coloring of mandalas in therapy, like, right? So I had naturally gone to a thing that's good for you to heal your mind, right? And then also I was seeing them with the dancing, and then to then led me, I found sacred geometry, and then I found like hyperspace diagrams and DNA art and all sorts of weird stuff. But that when I started having these and fractals, of course, fractals. I got really into fractals, and about the time that I really started to understand fractals was, I wouldn't say it was when the temporal or the time travel type experiences started happening for me. That was when I became aware of what they were, and so I could identify them as something. And so it wasn't just like, oh, that was weird. It was now a classified like occurrence, right, kind of thing. And so I think Mandela Effect better describes what the phenomenon is, and or fractal, or some sort of like fractal aspect fractalized reality, like fractal aspects of selves experiencing array of realities. There's a million ways to sort of parse those words. But I had these very weird experiences since the time that I was a kid, that like when the Mandela effect became popular, I'm like, oh, okay, I see. There's a name for this thing that I experienced. And like one of them was that like I would have this stuff happen when I was little, where like, or even into my like late teens and early 20s, where I'd like find a shop like in a little mini mall somewhere, right? And I'd go in there and I was like, oh wow, they have great stuff. Like they have some cool this or some cool that or whatever, right? And then I'd try, kind of like your thing with the squash, right?
It'd be gone. The store's gone.
I'd try to go back there, and not only would it not be there, but nobody knew what I was talking about, right? But I had products that I had gotten from there, right? Nobody knew what I was talking about. And sometimes, every once in a while, you'd meet somebody who remembered that also. Like, oh yeah, that was, but no, there was no evidence of it online or in the phone book or any stuff like that, right? So, and I also remember like different freeway exits that used to be there that weren't anymore, and things like that, like, or different parts of town. Now I have the same thing occur with like, there's like areas of certain cities I've lived in that exist in my dreams or in my like remote view space that don't exist when I like try to go find them in the physical, right, kind of thing. And so that kind of crosses over with it, but right. But you know, so I was like, oh, that's cute. They gave it a funny name, you know. And then the Mandela thing, like I couldn't say whether I thought Mandela died at an earlier date or not. That one wasn't a big one for me.
Me neither.
Yeah, you know. So so I thought that naming it the Mandela Effect was stupid, because that, like, we're all like, you know, we're all sort of geocentric or personal centric to a degree, right? And like, if you didn't have that Mandela Effect, then it's like dumb to you. Like, so for me, it would be better to call it the Bernstein Mirror Effect, or the, you know, whatever, the mirror effect, or whatever it is, right? But for a lot of people, they think that shit happened with the Mandela thing. So okay, like, you know, whatever, yeah.
You know, have you heard the term retcon?
Retcon?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Look it up for a good definition. I found this term recently, and it might be a good term for that experience of the Mandela Effect. Nish has a request when we're over this topic.
Okay.
If you understood that. Retcon typically refers to fictional work, but it's to revise retrospectively, typically by introducing a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events.
Yeah, so, okay, so that, I think that happens sometimes, and also that's a fancy term to make, that they put out there to make people who, you know, like insist that, you know, these things have happened or not happened sound crazy, right, kind of thing. So I think it's two.
And what we're doing at the pop culture shows too, I think. Sorry to interrupt, but
right. But there's also like ret and con. So we're dealing with the retina of the eye, which is where a lot of the programming of the mind control happens, and then con, right, which it's a con, right? They're like using control of your retina to con you, right? Like that's just another perception of it if you take the words apart. But yes, no, I think that sometimes happens, and I think like
just like in Blade Runner, that's how they could tell the people was by their eye.
Right, and we have retinal like recognition things with the computers and whatnot, like all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting term. I do think that happens. I do think that people like an idea gets introduced by, especially if it's by like a charismatic person or someone that you respect, and then somehow that gets woven into your recall of something that happened to you when maybe that wasn't really there in the original iteration of your memory. I do think that happens, but I don't think that makes your memory any less valid, because I'm not sure that we're living in the order that we think we're living in, right? Like, I think that like one of the things I've really been like dealing with lately is like, am I a good researcher, investigator, or discoverer of truth? Or am I really so good at making up a reality that the evidence will show up to backfill what I said was true? And I'm leaning more towards the latter. And I think that that's how a lot of these quote unquote like magicians or reality controllers are doing it, right? They say something is so with such a confidence or such a charisma or whatever that like the universe will literally organize itself to backfill in that reality and provide the evidence necessary for that to become the prevailing truth.
Yeah, I get you. I could see that very much so. And that gives me hope with the whole situation we find ourselves in now, is that I just keep thinking it's not just a pipe dream, but or a new agey kind of a thought at all. It's really like focusing on the reality that I want to create individually. And I think if enough of us do that, or at least if I do it, maybe it'll happen in my world.
Absolutely.
The worst could happen, and I can see a lot of bad things that could happen, but maybe if I just create something else and just refuse to accept anything else into my reality, that'll...
Everybody has the right to be the hero of their own life, or the legend in their own myth, or whatever it is, right? Like this idea that we all have to have like an agreed upon set of like facts and realities, like that's just bogus bullshit, and it's boring anyway, right? So it's like, yeah. So I want to address what Nish said. Nish, I'm going to be honest with you. I have never seen Dark City, but it is the topic of discussion for Conspiracy tomorrow night. So what I will be doing tonight is watching Dark City. I have attempted to watch Dark City twice. I'm about 45 minutes in. So I have trouble watching movies because I fall asleep.
Me too.
I like literally like when I was a kid, I'd fall asleep at the movie theater before the movie even started. And I can usually last about 30 to 45 minutes, which is why I'm much better with television series, like because the episodes are usually like at maximum 50 minutes, right? Kind of thing. So I can either, I can get through one a night, or I can take a break after one and then come back and watch another one or whatever. Every once in a while, I'm able to get through a movie like in one sit without having to rewind. I drive people nuts, right? Because I have to rewatch, or I'm asking what happened or whatever. Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is like something inside of me rejecting the programming, or if it was part of my programming as a kid. Like, I do think that movies and movie theaters were used heavily in some of the projects. So I don't know. It's just like I assume hypnosis the moment I'm in the dark or whatever with the movie. Yeah. Oops, you're frozen. There you are. Can you hear me?
A little freeze again, Emily.
Can you hear me? I can hear you now. Okay, we'll just hold on. It'll come back. Whoop. Can you hear me now?
I still see me in real time, and probably you are too, but I don't see you in real time. Let me refresh my page. Everything's
normal on my end.
Oh, I see you now. Hello. Maybe
I could hear you the whole time. You just couldn't hear me. Oops. Uh-oh. He's gone. I guess I'm by myself on the show now. Oops. I'm sure he'll be back. I hope he's coming back. Okay.
I'm back. There. I just refreshed. Sorry.
Okay. I could hear you the whole time. I don't know what was happening, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So Nish, I will be able to report back to you after I've watched Dark City what I think of it. But as far as 45 minutes in so far. It has a lot of the texture, tone, and feel of the underground dance music scene here in Los Angeles. I find it interesting that sometimes I would have an experience where like I walked into a party and I was at the party, and then when I left, the reality on the outside had changed, and I see some of that kind of stuff like possibly being hinted at in Dark City. So I'm not far enough in to say yet. But I do I'm having a weird synchronicity in that the watching of Dark City came along at the same time I was I've been watching, and this returns to what I wanted to talk with you about a little bit, going back, Philip K. Dick. I have been watching the TV show, or the Netflix show, The Man in the High Castle, and Rufus Sewell is the lead character both in Dark City and one of the main characters in Man in the High Castle. So it's interesting. Like, I had never seen him before, either of these things, and then suddenly he's in both of the things that I'm supposed to be paying attention to for various media reasons.
Is Dark City Philip K. Dick? No,
Dark City's not Philip K. Dick, but Man in the High Castle is Philip K. Dick.
Okay. But the character is the same? There's the same character.
Same actor.
Oh, same actor. Okay.
Rufus Sewell is John Smith in Man in the High Castle, and he's the main character. I can't remember the name of him in Dark City. Maybe Nish can fill us in.
Is that didn't I see, is this the same movie that maybe, I think I saw Quantum of Consciousness or some channel compare it. He was doing something about it being a sequel to The Matrix, or a prequel to The Matrix.
Yeah.
Sorry, lost my articulation there.
Yeah, no. I saw that come up in my feed too, that Matt had talked about the similarities or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and that looked interesting. And so that does look like a fascinating show. I gave up pop culture a long time ago, and I have the same issue with movies as you do, and I don't think I'll ever see this, but I read the plot synopsis, and yeah, it's fascinating.
Of Dark City.
Yeah.
Okay, so the interesting, this television show that I'm watching right now, though, called The Man in the High Castle, it's also Philip K. Dick. The Dark City isn't, but we've been talking about Philip K. Dick on and off since the beginning of the show here, right?
I'm with you. Yeah.
This series is excellent, and it is what is going on right now, right? Really? So like, I've always said that Fringe is what's going on, and Fringe is like a huge part. There's OA is going on, Sense8, there's a bunch of stuff. But at this very moment that we are in right now, the topics that we are all consumed with at whatever level of awareness and truth and awakening we're at are really, really like being dealt with in a very interesting way in this series. Is
it placed in like a future that's all?
Well, this is it's set in the past. It's like basically the premise is that the World War II went a different way. In America, the Allies lost, and that the United States was basically partially taken over. There's like the East Coast of the United States became the American Reich, and the West Coast became the Pacific States and belonged to Japan. And then in between there was a quote unquote neutral zone that was really not that neutral, but was kind of like the Wild West, right? Like in terms of like, not really any law and order, right? And anything goes except for the things that don't go, kind of thing, right? But it also deals with multiple realities, temporal distortion, like all this kind of, like genetic manipulation, eugenics, all of this kind of like, all racial purification, all these things that are topics right now are really, niche, the Westworld as well. There's so many,
even the original Westworld.
There's so many things out there that have a piece of it, right? But this moment that we are in right now, right? This moment that we are in right now with our relationship to like China, right? And with the civil war that has been going on in this country on at least a psychosocial level for the last 5 years or something like that, right? And the breaking apart of realities and the way that different areas of the country have handled the virus, blah, 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 and the discoveries that we're making that have to do with Antiquitech and Tartaria, or certain iterations of what shape the Earth is. I think when considering the Earth shape question, Like, I think that maybe the proper reframe for that is that, like, whatever the shape of the earth is, isn't the point, right? The shape of the earth is a feature of whatever the earth or the space we find ourselves in actually is. And I think that that's being dealt with in this television show, and it's being dealt with in the reality we're experiencing right now.
That's a big one. I still think that's big.
For this moment we're in, that Man in the High Castle just wrapped up the 4th or 5th season or something like that recently. So it's a couple of years. We're on the 3rd season now. When it started in like 2014 or 2015, and I just kind of found out about it from Michael Wan, who I do a series with, and he was like, "Yeah, this is important. You need to watch it." Right, and it really does hit on a lot of issues that like are front and center for a lot of people in my fractal of reality right now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so I'll just have to go read the plot synopsis for that and check it out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe some of the people out there will go and check it. That's the high castles.
The Man in the High Castle. The Man in the High Castle.
Okay, I'm ready. Yeah.
It's a Philip K. Dick. It's based on a Philip K. Dick book. It's not a literal. It's not a literal translation of his work, as most of the movies and shows that have been made about his work aren't. This one is particularly good, though. This one resonates for me more than a lot of the other Hollywood versions of his stuff did,
Cool. There's another one that people are talking about lately, and I don't remember the name of it. It's a one-word title, but they're saying that it's a very much echoing of this reality right now.
The other one that I've watched recently that's really good and really important and really easy to watch because it's not an ongoing series, it was just a short 6-part series, is The Queen's Gambit. And it goes to the drawing of the Masonic floor reality that we were talking about, because it's about chess. It's about a female chess player, right? And it hits in a very analog way. It's not like this kind of dystopic future story like so many things we get now are. It's like really just focused in on this story of this woman who's a brilliant chess player, right? And then, her personal struggles that went along with it. And it was unpredictable in a lot of ways. It was not what you thought was going to happen isn't what happened. But we've been able to find some very interesting strings that it connects to into some of the other things we're talking about a lot in the alternative media and whatever. We found connections to issues related to the Finders cult and MK Ultra and Masonry and Russian collusion and right? And just the name place, like geometry of place kind of connections and whatnot. And the redheaded orphan meme that's kind of out there right now is there. And then also, what was the other thing? There was something else that was kind of, for Nish will love this. Since we're mostly dealing with an audience of one at this moment, I'm going to cater to Nish with this, right? There's a big underwater, like there's a moment, and you'll catch it if you watch it, Nish, right? Where she goes and sits on the bottom of the swimming pool, right?
Fallon might still be there, by the way. Sorry.
Is Fallon still here? Fallon's been quiet. I know Fallon too, but Fallon's been quiet for a bit.
You are quiet, Fallon.
Right? But for all the people who will watch this later and whatnot, but Nish, she goes and she sits on the bottom of the swimming pool, like we've talked about like many times. So like the topic of like the underwater breathing and the projects and various things that have been talked about, like they nail that in a very easy to miss kind of way if you're not paying attention. But then just also the projection of her own reality onto the game board of the ceiling above her bed was, for people who've had these experiences, like, oh my God. Yeah, Nish, go watch it. It's really good.
Okay, so I'll reveal a little bit something right now. I've had an experience with the water too, and I've had some OBEs and NDEs throughout my life, but when I was a child too.
There's Fallon. She's back.
Good. Driving. That's good that you weren't texting and driving. Awesome. Now you can make some noise. Anyway, but I don't have any recollection of these projects that I've heard you and others talk about, but I hear so many other things that you do talk about that I do resonate with. So just, what is it? What do you?
Where do you live, or where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up. So I was born in California. I moved to Texas for a short time, and I've been in Colorado the rest of my life since like 7 years old. And there was a time where I traveled around a lot with my dad to some interesting locations throughout the United States. Very weird, interesting locations.
Yeah. So a couple of things, like different stuff for different people, right? Like it's not all the projects are not all the same kind of thing, right? And but also, like, I also sometimes in my own mind, and I talk about this with people sometimes, but you have to be careful because you don't want to offend. Sometimes, like, people have an idea of what they think something is. Like, for some of us, thinking of it as a project is just a way for our brain to make sense of something that is a feature of this reality that we don't understand.
I see.
Right? And so, like, okay, so here's an example. This is going to be like a small example, and then I'll take it into the bigger space. So, while satanic ritual abuse and sexual abuse is a rampant problem in our culture, and with people who think they've been in projects and programs, I also know a number of people who thought that they were sexually abused and eventually came to realize that it was traumatic for them one time when they were a kid, and they their parents gave them a suppository, because when we were kids, medications would be in suppository form, or they also had thermometers that they would put in your butt. Which,
I remember that too.
They're not pleasant experiences, right? But I had somebody who was in therapy for a long time for some kind of perceived possible sexual abuse, and really came in her heart to understand, and then got some verification from a sibling and whatever that she had a really bad case of some of the flu or some diarrhea or something when she was a kid, or whatever, and that it had been traumatic, the suppository for her, right? Okay.
Sure, yeah.
In her head, it was okay, I was violated, right?
Yeah.
So,
sure.
If we live in a reality that's different every day, and our brain is having trouble organizing it, and there seem to be people in our life who are aware that there's all this sort of weird stuff going on, and they seem to be present in the various versions of it. And so you still, right? In when you're trying to organize the experiences in your mind and you classify them together, it would seem like this was some sort of program or routine or training or something. And I'm not saying that it's not, right? But I'm just saying that we could also be maybe the point of the project is to keep us from realizing that we live in these multiple realities. And it isn't so much that we're going to some place and they're doing something to us, as much as it is there's a lot of attention being paid to managing someone's perception of what is happening, rather than tinkering around doing stuff to them. Although I think I do believe that these projects exist and are very, very common. But I also, to keep myself honest and to explore my own mind, my own consciousness, and to make sure that I don't get so caught up in my own narrative that I don't see the forest for the trees, sometimes challenge myself to sit with these possible other perceptions of what's going on.
Yeah, I've done that too, and I really don't think I've been alien abducted or really abducted or worked on by anything, but I've had experiences that that indicate some other things that.
But what's funny, and this is right, so my sister doesn't have any weird experiences like that. A weird experience for her is something that just happens every day to me. It's not she doesn't recall any of this weird stuff going on, right? But my sister also thinks that the biggest problem in the world, and I love my sister dearly, but she also thinks that the biggest problem in the world is probably racism and social injustice, right? She also thinks that well, I don't think I'm not convinced she fully buys this virus thing. She's willing to go along to make she's willing to sort of go along with it because it's the right thing to do to make other people more comfortable and all of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And she just has a whole different set of what reality is for her and what she's interested in than I do, right? So we could say that if someone's not having weird experiences, it could say that they're not paying attention, or we could say that maybe they're not interested in having weird experiences, and maybe you and I have them because we're interested in them, right? It's like ask and you shall receive. Like for me, like 100%, if someone came up to me and said, is it more important to you that your life be like good and pleasant and fun and easy, or that it be interesting? I would choose interesting every time. It's excellent when it can be like good and interesting, right?
Yes.
I had to pick interesting every time, right? And like for some people who are more conventional, they just want to be happy. And they just want to be happy and enjoy themselves and whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. So like, so I think that like anybody who wants to have strange experiences, and again, remember we might be living in reverse, right? You may have decided as a very old man that like weird shit is where it's at, right? So having those weird experiences as a child because the time is actually not linear in the way that you think it is, right? Like it's like Benjamin Button kind of shit, right?
I believe it. Yeah, all wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so I think that, right? So I think projects, exist on various levels and to various degrees, right? Just like, all of the other, fractalizations of reality we've been talking about. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the dark, you're gonna see the Dark City tonight, and then give me the report.
Yeah, I will report back. Yeah. We'll be talking about Dark City. So, well, when we do Conspiracy Cocktail, we don't necessarily talk about a topic. We like use some like TV show or movie or idea or whatever as like the jumping off point for like a kind of interesting off the wall discussion. So yeah,
I love it. I'm not sure if I've seen that. I'm not getting notifications about it. So what's it called again? It's the Conspiracy
Cocktail. It's something I started like right at the beginning of the coronavirus nonsense. It's an online speakeasy. It used to be every week. Now it's just every other week because I didn't realize coronavirus was going to last forever, right? When I signed up to do this. And so like we have like a pretty like highbrow, sort of high info kind of conversation. We drink cocktails. I'm also a cocktail mixologist, so I provide a unique cocktail recipe for everybody that they can make at home if they want.
Cool.
Right, so we have cocktails, we talk about weird stuff, and then afterwards, like I curate a selection of dance music because I like that as well. And so some people hang out and stay and listen to the music, others don't, and whatnot. But it's a non-recorded event. It's a live event only, and it's you can you can access it through my Patreon or
Patreon. Yeah, right.
I have a Conspiracy Cocktail Facebook group, so you can get information about it there. And then if you want to attend, you can do so through Patreon or through PayPal or whatever. It's totally fun. Like we've kind of got our own little like social hangout crew kind of thing going on over there. It's fun. Yeah. It's a good time.
That sounds so cool. I would love that. Maybe I'll get to join that sometime. Just started something similar to that online on YouTube, just impromptu the other week. It just kind of developed, but you got it at the right level. I love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
You're funny, Nish. Yes, Nish has been a guest on Conspiracy Cocktail. Nish, you can come anytime you like. You just have to let me know you want to come.
Nice.
Yeah. Nish gets a VIP list all the time.
Yeah, you're always invited here on this show too, Nish. Yeah, good conversation for sure. Always. And you too, Emily. So far, I've really enjoyed our conversation too. I hope that you'll consider coming back again. And I know that we're going to leave some things untouched, and there's so many things that you're going to be doing over the next few days that I want to hear more about and stuff. But my energy keeps going. So anytime that you feel like you need to take a break or wind down for the night or whatever, you just let me know.
Okay. I'm good to go for a little while longer.
Awesomeness. Cool. Me too.
So, where would you like to go next, my friend?
Wow. Well, do you have any requests, first of all, or things that are on your mind? Anything?
Well, I talk a lot on the YouTube, right? So it's like, I don't know that I have a thing that I haven't talked about that I've been dying. I haven't really talked about that stuff I told you about with the article from Rents and the test being vaccine. I haven't shown that technology before, so I debuted that version, that theory and version of reality here with you. So
yeah, I love it.
So you got that. So yeah, like you got the scoop on that. You know.
How about, go ahead.
No, so I mean, I have multiple shows every week, right? So generally, if something's on my mind, it comes out in the conversation, right? I did a couple shows yesterday and whatever. So I didn't know if there was anything else that you were interested that you wanted to ask me about, or topic you wanted to talk about, or you can just tell me some things about yourself, and I'll mash on that. whatever you want to do, I'm good.
Oh boy, if you get me started, I'll keep going too. I can just hyper focus and go off, and I have so many moving parts and synchronicities in my life and they're all wibbly wobbly stuff too, nonlinear connections, and so let's not get me started right now. That'll be another time. The two things that I'm curious about right now are, one is synchronicity, and earlier today I was watching a show that you did with Michael Wan. It was about conspiracy coincidence, and I love that. And also the concept of hand motions and the magic that weaves, because that's always been a huge part of my own personal magic.
Yeah. Okay. So the synchronicity thing. So like one of the things I noticed like pretty quickly, I mean, I've always had a lot of like synchronicities and sort of telepathic occurrences, but when the lockdown happened, all that shit started going through the roof. Like, and it got so much that like I had to stop paying attention to it. Otherwise, I just would be reporting synchronicities to you all day, and some of them would seem meaningful, and some of them would seem like like it only matters to me, right? But like I was having like crazy,
they're still important, I think. But go ahead. Yeah,
crazy amount of them, and then the telepathy, where like I remember one time like I was like in my like I will literally say into my head, I would like this person to do this thing right now. And then that person would start doing it. Like I would just be thinking that in my head, right? But like the telepathy or like the mental message sending kind of thing. Or
like earlier today, right before the show, I picked up this candle and the podcast said something about a candle right when I picked it up.
Everything.
A few other things tonight.
Everything has been like that. Like, right? Okay. And like weave over between like conversations with people into like books you were reading and a television show and some like fucking like you see like a flyer on the ground and the word of the thing is right, everything. It was just like all over the place, right?
Yes. No, can I like clarify? So that's always been in your world, but more so since the lockdown?
Great. I don't know if it's more or if it's just like because everything else was stripped away, suddenly we were like paying attention to things we didn't normally pay attention to, or they became more meaningful because we weren't so distracted with doing this and doing that and going here and going there, right? I also think that it's I think the telepathy and the synchronicity stuff, or the unveiling of the synchronicities that may have always been there, were an unexpected side effect of the turning on of 5G. And I think that like that's part of why they want people masked and in their houses, because they don't want them seeing all the shit that's going on, right? And I think it sped up for a while and then it slowed down, and so they were letting people go out, and then like another level of it is coming, and so we're in our houses and with masks again and whatever, right? So I think that I think I believe what I believe is those synchronicities have always been happening. I think synchronicity, like I go back and forth, like I don't. So there's synchronicities and there's coincidence, and I think they're not exactly the same, but they're similar. I don't know which one is modeled after the other. I read this really interesting book called Synchronicity by F. David Pete, right? Where I came to understand that like synchronicity was an intelligence tactic, right? That was basically presented to Tavistock and then distributed through them after they recognized the importance of it in culture creation and reality control. And then lately,
like a synthetic synchronicity?
So I think, okay, so remember what we talked about Costco?
Yeah.
About how it's like you can do a lot of stuff there. So I think that like the synchronicity on a certain level is a naturally occurring phenomena in certain places, right? And so maybe they will choose to do their false flag or their hoax at a place that seemingly naturally generates some of these synchronicities or coincidences. So then you have this like confusion or chaos that's created, right? And some of the synchronicities,
like Pandora's box of synchronicities opens up.
So they will like, so let's say like that, let's say that like that corner, that corner in Boston where the Boston bombing was, that there's a vortex there, right?
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
you're trying to pull some shit off, and you want to make the evidence, you want to make it confusing so people can't figure out what's what. So you go to this place that naturally generates synchronicity or coincidence, and then you also sow some intentional synchronicities into it, right? So you have things, you intentionally do some things that don't make sense, and then there's some that you know you're counting on that some will naturally occur because like this happens in this place, right?
Yeah,
and then
the possibility of these
overlap between the synthetic ones and the natural ones, right? So then those are the ones that are like the most fucking confusing, right? Or the ones that, right? So I think there's that level of it. So I think that they're, right? And then there's, I think it's like a synchronous, it's a natural feature of the system we live in, but some people know that and others don't. So the ones that know that can use it to their advantage and also can mimic it, right? And the people who don't know anything about it, like tends to think that it's something that's being done intentionally or to them or whatnot, right? Where right, all of it, right? Like I think that like the controlling class would like to think that all the things that seem fantastic, right? Like that they want us to think that they're the ones who are in control of them or manage them, and they might be in control of a few of them or managing a few of them, right? But some of them are just happening because that's the natural, it's a natural feature of our system, right?
Yeah.
And they fool us or perform magic on us is to get us to think that they're the ones making it happen. And then we think something's happening to us and they're powerful and we're powerless and whatever, right? So there's all that shit going on. But I think like, and I talked about this even with Nish, I think when I was on her show, right? Like I think some of the purpose of the masking and the staying home is that like this, it's naked now. Right? There's all this synchronicity and shit happening. And some of these synchronicities have been happening for a long time. And some of the quote unquote targeted individuals or people who are just more observant or aware of reality were picking up on them, you know, earlier, Philip K. Dick, and then all of these other people since then or whatever. And now people who are just normies are going to start to notice them, and they're going to be bothered by them in a way that like we're no longer bothered by because we've been living with it for a long time. And so they're going to look at the people who aren't freaking out about it, who coincidentally are also probably the people who aren't wanting to wear masks. And they're, oh my God, you're so cute. Oh.
What's up, Shaka?
Hi. These people are going to think that the people who aren't wearing the masks, just like they think the people who aren't wearing the masks are going to like make them sick or whatever, or a terrorist, right? Also, that maybe these are the same people that are like creating these coincidences or synchronicities, right? That like everybody is now a target individual. Then recently, Michael and I got into really looking hard at John Lilly, right? Who is a very underreported on MK Ultra doctor, right? We all know about John Lilly because of the float tanks, right? But if you go dig into his history, he's a fucking MK Ultra doctor, right? And you don't hear about him in those same conversations that you hear about like Sidney Gottlieb and Ewan Cameron and, you know, Jose Delgado and some of these other people, right? Like you hear about Lilly more in the psychedelic conversations, right? Wow. Which are also controlled in MK Ultra projects, but people think about them differently than the people who are like doing brain experiments on people, right? He's in both. He was part of the psychedelic MK Ultra and part of like the electrodes in the brain MK, both. He was part of both. And,
was he a Nazi?
Huh?
Was he a Nazi? Just
it's possible. Like it's possible, but that
from the paperclip thing.
I don't know. The story is he was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I don't think so. But we don't. Who the fuck knows, right?
Right.
So he, in digging into him, well, first. I've been digging into him a little bit for a while, but then as part of that, we discovered this sort of document or like kind of a manifesto he wrote about the Earth Coincidence Control Network, right? Like
Earth
that
Coincidence Control Network.
Yes, like he literally is basically saying that there's like, I mean, it's something you kind of have to look. I'm still not sure what to make of it.
I've got to find out about this.
Right. So if you dig into John Lilly and look up ECCO, all capital letters, ECCO, right? Okay. Coincidence Control Organization, right? And so basically, like, it sounds a lot like some of the structure of like what we would consider, you know, how like we talk about like, we agreed to come into this reality and blah, 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 right? That kind of shit. Or like when we talk about having been in projects, well, there must have been some part of me that needed to have that experience or whatever, right? This like plays into that in a way where it's basically like this whole thing is like a training. This whole experience here on Earth is a training to understand the way that coincidences, both small and large, are controlled and to learn to control them yourself. And when you learn to control the coincidences yourself, you are no longer need to be in training here, and your services can go elsewhere, right? So I'm not saying like this could be a huge steaming, heaping pile of bullshit, or very profound. And it just came into, we were already looking at synchronicity, and then this coincidence control came up, and so we've been playing with this. We've been playing with it, and we've been looking into John Lilly and others who. We know are connected to and related to him, and others who don't seem to be, but we're sure are, right? And I think he's an interesting character that deserves several more looks, not just one.
You were talking about that in the episode I watched, and did you say he had something to do with the TV show Flipper?
Yeah.
You know, there's a Mandela effect about Flipper.
Oh, please tell me about the Mandela.
I don't remember what it is. I have to look it up. There is, unless I'm just making that up. I know it's about last week.
There's a reality where you remember the Flipper Mandela effect, and one that you don't, and then another where you remember that you don't remember.
That's right.
Right. So for me, so like I was obsessed with Flipper when I was a kid. TV show Flipper, right? Yeah. I also had
actually, my friends called. I had a CRX my freshman year in college, and I had an alarm on it, and my best friend called it Flipper because it sounded like a flipper chirping.
Yeah, but the friend who was a doctor who helped me clean my diet from Candida, she gave me the nickname Flipper, right? So that's kind of weird too.
Huh. Okay.
He was involved with work with marine land, where I had a very strange experience when I was little, right? He created the anechoic chambers that are now known as float tanks. Right, which have been talked about greatly in terms of projects and programs and all that kind of stuff, and now are a therapy, right?
Yeah, I remember. I have a horror story about those. Okay, go ahead.
He was interested in all sorts of like brain programming, telepathy, electro-optics, like all kinds of different like using putting someone in an anechoic chamber and then generating sound and light frequencies at them. Right, which was definitely used in projects, and also is, if you think about what like an underground warehouse party or a rave is, you are basically in an anechoic chamber that is full of sound and light frequency, right? And so like there's a huge parallel to those experiences for me, but when you start to dig farther and farther and farther into all the things that he was into, right, like you start to wonder, as you do with a lot of these characters, like, what was really going on here? Was he the perpetrator or the victim of the mind control projects he was working on, or both? Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Like, he seems to like get a pass, right? In some cases that I don't think he deserves. And in other cases, he seems to be ridiculed or vilified in a way that I also think he doesn't deserve.
In what way could he be a victim of it?
So like, I know somebody, I was recently acquainted with somebody who knew him, right? And he thinks of him as like, oh, you have to be, he's a, oh, dear, I think what he said about him was like, oh, dear, sweet John Lilly, but everybody knew not to give him any drugs, right? Everybody like, right, oh, this poor guy, his brain was addled from drugs, and he was a sweet man, right? And then there's the reality of, now, do they want to keep the drugs away from him because the reality that he was peering, like this, it was on some of these drugs where he says he discovered the Earth coincidence control kind of thing, right? So keep him away from the drugs because it makes him crazy, or because he discovered something that is true, and that he tapped into like a layer that was one deeper than you're supposed to go, right? I don't know. Either, right? And so like he also seemingly did some pretty vicious things to dolphins, but also seemed genuinely fascinated by them, right? So it's like, and he seemed to be bothered. Like if you read some of his diary entries, like he was bothered by what the government wanted to do with the results of the research that they funded him to do. And so at a certain point, he didn't want to participate in the government-funded projects anymore, right? So like, was he manipulated or taken advantage of? And did he step away from that? And or it's hard to determine what the truth is about him. So I think that like the same amount of attention that's been applied to some of these other characters of both the psychedelic and the mind control movements, he needs to have that microscope applied to him, that looking glass, that really close look, and see, what you find. And then I also think like with all these people, like we don't know what the fuck is going on, like, right? Like I think that, like, when you are looking at someone with the idea that this person is bad, or when you are looking at someone with the idea that this person is good, you can't get a clear read. So neutrality when investigating these characters, and they are characters. This is a show. This is a play. This is not, a real reality like we're told it is. I think that like both neutrality and a healthy dose of like both skepticism, but then also like sometimes when you're looking into it, just allow yourself to lose, like take in the information as if it were true for a while, sit with it, then like start from neutral, then go to that stage, then apply skepticism, and then back to neutral, and then you may be able to get to a ballpark accurate assessment of what was really going on. But I think some people go after these people with the intent to expose them. Others go after with the intent to lionize or make them wonderful or gods. Both are wrong. These are just human beings who also didn't know what the fuck was going on and was trying to discover it. And maybe they found something that, was dangerous to somebody, or maybe not, right?
Well, yeah, my essential belief is that people they're essentially trying to do the best that they feel they can in all given circumstances. They're not trying to be a villain or do anything bad unless they see it as something that's really good in their world for some reason or another. And
we all get carried away with ourselves, right? Like when we get into something and we're like, ooh, this is fucking interesting, right? Sometimes we wander off into a room in the hallway that we shouldn't be in, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So we've all done it. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, John Lilly, I'm gonna have to check him out. That sounds like another rabbit hole of fun stuff.
Yeah. The Flipper show was like one of those weird shows that like I had this magnetic attraction to when I was a kid. Like the other one was The Land of the Lost.
Oh, I remember that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was something mysterious about like The Land of the Lost was a really weird one because like it was always hard to find. Like they moved that one around a lot. Like whenever I could find it, I was like, oh my God, I found it. It was kind of like looking for a good party or like, the exact like right, like roast of coffee. You know what I mean? Like when you're right. Like it was like I found some awesome delicacy of something, right? And then the Flipper one was more like a hypnotic attraction too, right? So
I remember seeing Flipper a little bit, but I don't remember it real clearly. I just remember the intro and a few some bits, but definitely remember Land of the Lost pretty clearly. And
I think Land of the Lost is a real place. I think it exists in the Palm Springs area of California.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like in that area between it's called it's called Cabazon and Palm Springs. So so in that area between Cabazon and Palm Springs, like I do think that there is like an interior world that I don't know if they're necessarily dinosaurs, but where there is some sort of prehistoric creatures or some kind of like Jurassic Park kind. I don't know. I mean, that's another one that was like one of those things like Flat Earth and Tartaria was the no dinosaur, that dinosaurs aren't real, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're real or not. Like, I don't know if it's important to know if they're real or not necessarily. But I think there's something weird, like some weird inner earth with these large, strange looking animals somewhere in that area.
Well, I think, okay, that's fascinating. I have to look into that. I think personally that with all these things, with the flat Earth, with dinosaurs, with space itself, and so many things, they're misdescribed, if anything. Maybe, like you said, I'm not a flat earther, but I do not believe in what we've been told, the basic heliocentric model and all that stuff.
I'm not a flat earther, but I'm also not a flat earther.
Yeah,
right?
Me too. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so the
point is it's misdescribed to us by
and like everything else, like maybe the earth isn't always the same either, right? Like,
right.
I think it's possible that like there's like an aspect of it that is flat or disc-like, and then there's an element that is like toroidal that gives the illusion that it's spherical kind of thing, and then there's like a vortex kind of going through the middle, right? So I think a lot of things are going on, and I don't think it's always the same, and I think there could be like an electromagnetic projection that makes it seem like there's some kind of firmament or something, but it's not really like solid, like glass or ice, like some people describe it. It's like a frequency wall kind of thing, right? So I don't know, but I think that a lot of these things that are misdescribed, like space, like a flat Earth, like dinosaurs or whatever, I think they may exist inside the Earth, right? And I think like of civilizations that people think are lost just moved into the Earth. They moved the surface down inside. I don't know for sure, right? But I think I'm almost 100% sure that what's been described as us to space actually exists under the ground, not in the sky.
I could see that. That's fascinating.
And the other thing I think of is the thing that's described to us as the secret space program is the same thing as the brain mapping program.
The brain mapping program?
Yeah. Like, I think that when we are observing the sky or when we're thinking about space, it's largely like a projection of our own minds, that these nodal points and that these archetypes and things like that exist in our minds and in our brains. And we, they would love for us to think that everything that is internal is external, like this whole inverted reality that they give us. But also it's human nature to project everything externally, to think of, right? Just like we are having, but it's being misdescribed and therefore miscarried out. We're going, and you know this because you're into like yoga and spirituality, that what is really happening in this time that we're in is that like people's masculine and feminine energies are coming into balance in a way that they hadn't been before. And the system is forcing that to be expressed as this transgender thing. Right? Like everything is external, right? So I'm having a feeling that I have been told is a masculine feeling, therefore I must be a boy, therefore I must remove my breasts and get a penis and take these chemicals that will let me have facial hair, but will also be rewriting all the chemical synapse connections and doing all this other stuff, right?
Use your femininity to the process. Yeah, yes, I understand, yes.
Yeah, so I think the same thing goes, like think about like, from the time we're a kid, it's like, look up to the sky, right, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe one day you'll go to Mars, right? Kind of thing. When maybe the more important thing they should be telling kids is like, examine your own mind. Like maybe one day you'll come into yourself, right? Like, you know, if you become self-actualized during this lifetime, then that's as great of a journey as one from here to the stars or whatever, right? So I think it becomes this very external quest, and I think that so I don't think people go to Mars, at least not in the way that it's been described, and they definitely don't go in a spaceship.
I agree with you. and it's metaphorical of the sea.
The deep sea for sure. Yeah. Like the sea and space are very to the extent that space exists, it's really heavy. Like plasma, kind of like amniotic fluid kind of water, right?
Yeah, and like Crow says, makes the same observations. And personally, I've always seen the that what you just said makes sense, because when I was very small, I kind of thought of maybe the universe as a big body and we were an organ inside the universe, you know.
Totally.
So,
I mean, it totally is. If you look at, have you ever looked at like esoteric anatomy, like
oh yeah,
designs? Like they'll be like Saturn is here, Jupiter is here, right? Like
right.
what, like, you know, everything, like I think it could be within our own bodies, or it could even be an extension of our bodies, like Russian dolls, right? So like very innermost, something that's like, so like maybe the body that you see of me is like my Earth body, and there's a Venus and a Mercury body inside, right? And then on the, and a Mars body, and then on the outside of me you have the Earth, Mercury, Venus, Earth. No, sorry, Mars is past Earth. You have a Mars and a Jupiter and a Saturn and a Neptune and blah blah blah, right? And those are like equal to like your etheric, astral, causal, you know, what all the different, but depending on if you're into like, you know, Vedic stuff or Zen stuff or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever, right? There's different names for these different layers, right? Or nesting doll kinds of stuff, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways you can visualize this to help you understand it. But I think like there's a huge investment in having people believe that that stuff is all very far away and out of their reach, rather than something either right within them or close by all around them that they can very easily access, interact with, know, all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that goes back to how, you know, when we first started talking about how like just existence itself, like that question about where are we and stuff, and there's more, you know, that's happening, and it's like the inner, like what we see on the outside is just not, it sounds cliche. I don't know how to really say it without sounding trite, but you know, it's an illusion, right? I mean, what's happening? There's something else happening. It's a different layer, and looking on the inside helps you find it. It's so funny. When I was, my earliest memories of being in school were we had this time where we could we could either read or draw or something. And so my friend and I used to draw, and I spent day after day constructing this submarine that I wanted to take and find the bottom of the ocean and explore the depths of the oceans. And I want to find the Bermuda Triangle, and that kind of got off into the woo of things. But yeah, and I still think that there's so much mystery about the sea, and it always made me just kind of pissed off that nobody has explored the whole sea. I mean, how could
right? Isn't it weird? Like we have a space force, but we don't have a deep sea force.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Like the Marines and the Navy are supposed to deal with the water, but we don't ever hear about like, you know, the new civilization they found on the ocean floor or anything like that, even though like we hear about like, oh, it seems like we're getting some sort of like communication, or there's like a fungus on Mars that looks like the same kind of colony we see here, whatever, right? Like you get that, you don't get that about the sea, even though like it's right here, and according to what they say has a like finite bottom, which we don't know about. According to their information, we don't know about space. Like we do know that a seafloor exists, what they say. Maybe there is no seafloor. Maybe like it's endless in both directions, or maybe there's limits on both directions, right? But like, you know, and if you've looked into like bioluminescence, haven't you? And like, right,
Crazy.
That shit looks like stuff they say they see in outer space. And then if you look at like a lot of the stars look like sea creatures, like the Crab Nebula and all that kind of stuff. Like that's shit you find on the ocean floor. And then if you go into some areas on the bottom of the ocean floor, you bump into hexafluoride layers, which are the really deeply saline things that cause like that. They try and send, you know what I'm talking about?
Those they shoot that? You mean they kind of do an explosion of gas or something, or
no? So well, I know what you're talking about that, but what I'm talking about is like I watched this this documentary on the History Channel or one of the nature channels one time, and they went to the bottom of the ocean floor and something that looked very similar to as a child things that were like in our coloring books and storybooks about like UFOs or spaceships, right? So took that to the bottom of the ocean, and when they got to this one area, like even though they could see that there was way more sea before, right? They couldn't go anymore. They like bounced up against something that was like a trampoline and kept bouncing them back. And what it was like, it's a more saline part. So it was like on the bottom of the ocean floor, there was like a lake bed. And in that lake bed was saltier water, right?
I see. Yeah.
And they couldn't pass through the salty water, so it was just bouncing right off of it, right?
Like a
And
firmament.
what's interesting is like there was all these sea creatures living on the edge around that like lake bed on the seafloor, the same way fucking people build their houses around the lake and or on the coast or whatever, right? So
Wow.
that seems to be a natural phenomenon that people do that. But that same bouncing, so there's hexafluoride layers both at the bottom of oceans and also like Chad Stumpke told me that they're also on the bottom of like Lake Superior and stuff like that, right? Like where people you get to a certain point and it just bounces you back even though the ocean floor is not quite right there.
Wow.
The fluoride layers exist there and also in the sky, right? And so like a lot of what some people describe as like a firmament or like, they send up a fucking rocket and it bounces. There's a million explanations. I don't know which one is right, but it has that same effect of like the bounce back, right? Now, fluoride layers, the geometry of that chemical structure is hexagonal, right? Obviously, but also a lot like a Metatron's cube, right? Or different kinds of sacred geometry that are used in magic, like applicational geometry that people can use in certain kinds of magic, magicians, the hand movements that you said you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah.
You can achieve the same vibration through you can achieve like the same effect through creating a vibration that cymatically creates a hexafluoride shape, that same geometrical shape. You can actually have a chemical that is hexafluoride, right? Or you can, draw the geometric shape or do right kind of thing, and then the same thing happens. So like there's all these weird like we don't understand how like boundaries actually work. There's like multiple ways to like construct boundaries, and you can do it with even something sometimes as similar as like remember when you were a kid, it'd be like draw a circle or draw a doorway on the wall, and then you can go through it or draw a circle on. I mean. That's a little simplistic, but it's not that far off. Like a lot of the ideas we had as kids were much closer to reality than the ones we have now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So the hand motions, you wanted to ask me about the hand motions, you said.
Yeah, we could, let's just touch on that real quickly because there's a different thing that I want to go into that has to do with coincidences. But
and go to the other thing you want. Go to whichever one you want.
Let's go to this instead. It's something Niche has brought up a few times in our conversation and other things I've heard her talk about. And it's funny. She had a show the other day that was pre-recorded from September, but it was James Bartley, and there were a lot of things that I found interesting about that. But so the concept of possession and the kind of possession that we've seen, or that some people have noticed, me being one of them, in people around us since the lockdown, and like a very distinct thing, like that kind of moment where you're talking to somebody, and then suddenly something changes, and they're talking. There's somebody else, even if it's somebody or even whatever, and they're talking sort of out of context or out of character in a certain way, and it just seems they seem like something is talking through them. Have you experienced that? Okay,
so this is so first of all, hello, if James hears this, hello James. I like James
so we talked about James Bartley earlier.
Yeah, and I like James, I like Nish, okay. So one of the things, like sometimes you like meet somebody in your alternative media travels, right, that like you so like vibrate with and agree with, right? But where you differ maybe is where you think something is coming from, right? So we can agree on like all this stuff, right? And when I say this, like I'm not saying that I'm right and he's wrong or he's right and I'm wrong. Like it isn't about right and wrong for me. It's about like figuring out, like what the fuck is going on and how to play with it and whatever, right? Yeah. So like he's like, so most of his like research and experiences and studies are really into the phenomenon of like aliens and abductions and entities and possessions and things like that, which I have done obviously some research and has some experience with, but that isn't so much my focus, right? Like my focus has largely much more been on mind control from a human perspective as opposed to coming from something that is now.
That's my interest too. Yeah.
You could say easily that like a human that would perform mind control on another person, like there's something unhuman about that, right? And I could, but like
it's different than the UFO alien thing and all that.
It's a different thing. It's a different thing, right? And so for me, the phenomenon that you guys are talking about, absolutely, right? But I've noticed that with people for other times before the lockdown, but it's increased since the lockdown, right?
Yes.
So the idea of possession. Yeah, but I think like when I think of possession, I don't think of it's not the first thing that occurs to me like an alien or a demon or or like something, that's not the first thing that occurs to me. Generally, the first thing that occurs to me is concern, like that people are possessed with this concern. Either they're concerned for their possessions, right? Right. Like, and so they like when I say possessions, I mean like the life that they've built from themselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or they're really very, very concerned with like how people perceive them, and they're so concerned with it, it mimics what we have read about in legends for our entire lives as like a possession, a demonic or an alien sort of invasion, possession, body snatcher kind of thing. When you couple that with like the unhealthy lifestyles that we live and the things that the constant exposure to the computer screens and the medias and stuff like that, right? So I think that like people have been fed a script, right? And they're playing their roles. And when you see somebody, when you run into somebody who is familiar to you, they're your friend, or like you bump into someone and you take a liking to them, for a second you fall out of character, and the humanity comes through, and then something will happen. You see something, they see something out of the corner of their eye, or you hit up against a third rail topic that they're uncomfortable with, and suddenly they snap back into the NPC role character that the media and their need to hold on to their possessions tells them that they are, right, kind of thing. And to me, it's definitely, I see it like it. There's an interdimensionality to it, and also an inner dimensionality to it, right? And so, like,
multidimensional.
Yeah, and so, like, I certainly, like, definitely, people when I was on drugs would remark sometimes that like I seemed possessed, right? And like that's possible. I certainly think that like when you have a certain thing in your body, it's like a magnetic attraction to something out here. So there's, I fully believe that there's entities and energies and aliens or demons, however you want to call them, that like exist outside of our vibrational reality that are just waiting for a magnet to attract to, whether that be drugs or negative energy or bad food or whatever the fuck it is, right? But there's always, in my opinion, something going on with the person that is something that they can take personal responsibility for, right? I've never met a person who's just like, totally honest with themselves, totally like in spiritual alignment with themselves, totally like doing things like on the up and up, right, kind of thing, that is having a huge problem with this. We all experience some of these things like once in a while where you're like, did you just feel that fucking energy come in or something is, whatever. We all have that. But right? Like, but when it's like, I know we have all heard these people who are just like, I'm constantly being attacked, or I'm constantly being abducted, or I'm constantly being interfered with, or whatever. If it's happening constantly, like there's something in your house you need to clean, right?
Yeah.
And once that's cleaned, if it's still happening, it's probably going to be happening a lot less. And if it's still happening, it should be very obvious where it's coming from, or there's a need to dig deeper within yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, so I don't think that it isn't alien, but I think that it's always like a joint. It's like there has to be something going on internally for the external thing to latch onto, right? Uh-huh. And so, like, I don't believe that, like, I don't. Like, I know for myself that as soon as I stopped doing drugs, no one ever said that to me again. about like, oh wow, you seem like you're like, you know, somebody else or possessed or something like that, right? Even if I have a bad day and I'm cranky or angry, like people will be like, oh, you're being a bitch today, but no one's like, you know, you're like some weird entity that I don't know, right? I don't ever hear that, right? So for me, it was like when I was on drugs, sometimes I did feel like something came into me, right? And it probably did, but I opened the door, right? I opened the door. So I think like there's that question. And I do think that there's other things here. I don't think humans are the only game in town, right? But I also think we often write off to things that we call not human, things that are human activities. And it's a disturbing thing to think that there are people that are supposedly the same species as you that are so gross that they would do these disgusting things that one would only imagine a demon or an alien or a monster would do, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's like so many people, you know, like it's, to me, it's very, very obvious that like at least 90% of the quote unquote like alien anal probe stories are really sexual assault by a family member or a trusted loved one, that the person cannot believe this is happening. And so their mind turns it into the other, into a monster or a demon or something like that, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's I really wasn't, I'm not on the demon aspect. I'm more like kind of what Nisha's saying about the AI and the singularity tied to the connectivity of humans and something like that. It's more that kind of thing. It's not like someone turns into a raging troll or something. It's like they just become kind of like you're dealing with a computer, like you're trying to log into your computer and it won't let you or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like when you have like there's an element inside of yourself, and then we live in this frequency soup that like activates the thing inside of yourself that is not dealt with, and then these other external things are attracted to it. Right?
Sure.
Right? Like it's like sucks it right in. And then you have this thing that sort of has taken over your computer, like a virus or malware or whatever, and then it's acting from that space, right? So yeah, absolutely.
That's a good analogy. It's like you were talking earlier about Bill Gates and the virus of the computers and the virus that we're dealing with now. And
did you ever play with Magnadoodle or Etch-a-Sketch when you were little?
Oh yeah, lots.
Okay, so the way that worked was there was all these magnetic particles under the screen, and then there's the screen, and then you had the wand on the outside or the dial on the outside that would control the magnetic parts, right? So think of like the bad food, the drugs, the nanotechnology that maybe you're not responsible for putting it there, but like once you start to deal with your health and your body, you can take a certain level of control over that. So these all the medical, the metal shavings or the magnetic particles inside of you, right? And then you have this thing, your skin suit, your body, that you think that everything that is not inside is on the outside, right? And so like something comes along, so you can think of like the entity comes along and is like, oh, there's all that shit in there. Like I know that I'm attracted to that shit, and then they become like a little like pen that's leading the Magnadoodle or the Etch-a-Sketch stuff around, and they are fucking controlling your life. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. That makes sense.
Yep.
And like Nish said, it's a mapping sequence. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Wow. Yep. Freaking awesome. That's I mean, not awesome, but it's awesome to talk to you about it, and that's, you know, to go down roads and things. And I'm starting to feel like we should probably wind it up. I'm taking so much of your time, but I really appreciate it. You've got me really thinking. I've got some more things to look up and more concepts to explore. And I just really appreciate your insight and that perspective that you have about coming at everything really with a little bit of skepticism, but not disbelief, just, you know, like cautious exploration, I guess, or something, but open to possibility, and not really, it seems like to me that you're willing to change your opinion when you get new information. I think that's real important. Yeah,
I've changed my opinion many times, right? About things, and sometimes I go back to an old one or whatever, and it's constantly evolving and shifting and changing, just because I don't even know if I'm in the same reality every day, right? So what I'm dealing with, like what may have been true in the reality I was in 2011, that may have been dead right for that one, but for this one it's wrong, so I have to shift it. I can't make everything that reality. And then the other thing is, and this is my advice to anybody who's like on this journey that we're on, right? Because it can be maddening at times. It can make you physically sick. It can be very stressful. It can be very lonely. It can also be awesome and fun and all that kind of stuff. Is like, you know, when you like, a lot of this information is very in these experiences are very bothersome. They're very worrisome, right? But there's also some of the shit that is like fucking hilarious. Just like the fact that like, you know, there's no laws that say you have to wear a mask, but everyone thinks that you have to wear a mask, right? Like just like it's like how stupid, right? Like they're literally saying, right? They're literally saying that like, you know, like vaccine basically doesn't work, but it's going to be mandated, you know, like, and then people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's going to make me sick, but I should probably take it because if not, I might get the flu, right? The vaccine might kill me, but it's better than getting the flu. So this is an insane clown world we live in. And I have noticed for myself and for like the people that like have helped me along on my journey, that when you get to the place where you are at least equally as amused by this all as you are annoyed by it, and preferably slightly more amused, then it's going to be like good sailing from there, right? Like it's going to be more of an adventure than it is like a nightmare from there. And so like that's the really like whatever work you need to do on yourself to get yourself to that place where like you can recognize that this is there's a cosmic giggle going on here kind of like, that balance between taking yourself like seriously and not taking yourself seriously and all, it's very important. You know what I mean? And you'll discover more truth when you're laughing than you will when you're like, oh my God, this is fucking terrible, you know? So anyway.
Yes, I agree with you totally. Absolutely. And I'm definitely to that point. I mean, I definitely get down about things and whatever, but mostly I'm that. Do you know Benny, I think it's Benny Wills, the conspiracy guy from Joy Camp? You familiar with him?
I feel like I've heard. So Joy is who's? I think I'm confusing him with Lee Camp. Okay.
Joy Camp. They were like a comedy group that put together some videos and stuff. And he had a character called,
I feel like I met somebody from that at like an event I went to a couple years ago. I don't remember.
The guy with kind of a fro.
Yes, I met him. Yes.
He's funny as hell. His stuff is really, I think is great. The conspiracy guy, and he has a weekly meme show that he does, and he creates memes, you know, they're poking fun at stuff, and I just like the way he's really trying to be funny about the whole thing.
It's fucking funny, dude. It's I mean, when you see like a dude like in his car rocking out by himself with his mask on, if you can't that, then what's the point of being alive if you can't just be like that? You know what I mean? It's fucking funny, dude. Right?
You know, it's so funny. I was on a date the other day, a new person I met, and we went for a little hike. And she wasn't wearing a mask either, which is cool. But there was nobody out, right? And we got out to the middle of nowhere on this hiking trail, and there was a guy with a mask. And he sees us, and he like takes a step way off the trail and walks around us. He goes, "Fucking idiots!" as he's walking by us. Like, wow.
But the question to ask yourself is like, was he saying "fucking idiots" like every 10 feet all along his walk? Because he was wearing a mask out in the middle of nowhere by himself. Right, so it's like he's talking to himself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then you at the moment that it happens, you think he's talking to you, but he's the dude out in the middle of the fabulous nature of Colorado or wherever you live by himself with a fucking mask on.
Yep.
Right, so you know it's fucking funny, dude. Have a laugh. If he's happy in his mask, then have at it, right?
I do. I've gotten to the point now where I've seen people in cars with masks on, and just everywhere, I'm just like, I laugh. I'm just like, oh my God.
Whatever, dude. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been totally fun and enjoyable, and I look forward to chatting with you again. And thanks for playing along, Nish and Fallon, if you're still there, and whatnot. And it was totally fun. We can do it again.
Most excellent. Have a stellar night. Take care.
Okay.
And I'll be seeing you in a while. And thanks everybody in the chat for being here. I love you so much. And
all right. Awesome. Bye, Nish.
Take care. Have a good night, everyone.